sure you can hear yourself in the or your mic is picking you up and not your stupid ass Oculus. Okay.
There we go. It's all set up.
Okay. I'll miss you.
But I'll miss you too.
Send me the link and I'll go when I'll go.
Sorry, huffing and puffing.
I'm not huffing and puffing.
No, I said I'll do it.
Oh. Yay. Okay. Okay. Say the word and then
I
I'll go.
love you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
How does a dive still work? I think I can take this guy's red before he comes back. Are you kidding? Ay ay ay. That's not gonna work, buddy. Is Rengar good in the meta? Yeah, he's definitely underrated. I think people are complaining a bit too much. Okay, so I think this guy has flash. I should have swept this area as well. Viego's definitely up here, so I should be ready to smite this if I need to. Yeah, he's up there. I'm gonna do my Krugs and hover topside, although he could be mid. Now I'm rotating mid, I'm gonna hover mid just in case Viego dives for ganks. Viego is seen going bot side, so this Herald should be free. I could even gank top right now. Push this out, he doesn't have TP. Bot shouldn't be fighting that. Got that counter dive. Make sure to use your trinket as soon as possible, just to get that shit on cooldown. Put on my bot side, I think, is the correct play. How is the Lee Sin matchup? Lee Sin wins. The fight going on here. Okay, well, I couldn't escape that, so Syndra didn't really help me out there. Kaisa also didn't really move. Going for this is kind of bad. Okay, since it's warded, I'm just gonna get the fuck out because it's not worth my time. All of my camps are up, so I don't want to be wasting time going for players that aren't guaranteed to work out when I can just full clear my entire jungle and then reset before Drake. That's so fucking lame that he can jump that far. Yo, they need to fix this shit. Every time you I don't know if you guys know this, but if you use Herald, it resets your trinket. Kind of OP. It's been a thing since like season 10. Riot hasn't done anything about it though.
Oh fuck, Scrub noob. He's actually the best Rengar in the world.
I was low, so I was thinking he'd like try and flank me or something. But how does a dive still work? I think I can take this guy's red before he comes back. Are you kidding? Ay ay ay. That's not gonna work, buddy. Is Rengar good in the meta? Yeah, he's definitely underrated. I think people are complaining a bit too much. Okay, so I think this guy has flash. I should have swept this area as well. Viego's definitely up here, so I should be ready to smite this if I need to. Yeah, he's up there. I'm gonna do my Krugs and hover topside, although he could be mid. Now I'm rotating mid, I'm gonna hover mid just in case Viego dives or ganks. Viego is seen going bot side, so this Herald should be free. I could even gank top right now. Push this out, he doesn't have TP. Bot shouldn't be fighting that. Got that counter dive. Make sure to use your trinket as soon as possible, just to get that shit on cooldown. Go to my bot side, I think, is the correct play. How is the Lee Sin matchup? Lee Sin wins. The fight going on here. Okay, well, I can escape that, so. Syndra didn't really help me out there. Kaisa also didn't really move. Going for this is kind of bad. Okay, since it's warded, I'm just gonna get the fuck out because it's not worth my time. All of my camps are up, so I don't want to be wasting time going for players that aren't guaranteed to work out when I can just full clear my entire jungle and then reset before Drake. That's so fucking lame. They can jump that far. Yo, they need to fix this shit. Every time you I don't know if you guys know this, but if you use Herald, it resets your trinket. Kind of OP. It's been a thing since like season 10. Riot hasn't done anything about it though.
Oh fuck, scrub noob. He's actually the best Rengar in the world.
I just need to play patient for my ult. Oh, I actually one-shot him. Wonder why they're defending. This game is over. be careful, because if I die, they all get revived. Viego could also be somewhere. We haven't seen him yet. I actually think Viego's somewhere. Okay, there he is. Okay, well, my plans change, I guess. In my brain, I was gonna one-shot one of their squishies, but they both have crowns, so. Viego somewhere. Well, because we last saw him here, and he knew that I was low, so I was thinking he would like try and flank me or something. But wasn't the case.
Thank you, everyone, for your exceptional patience. I'll tell you, this is not the way I meant to appear before you today. I meant to, like, grab a shower, freshen up, maybe change my shirt, something like this. But as it happens, this is an appropriate shirt for this venue anyway. Yeah, but the plane had a 2.5-hour delay sitting on the tarmac with no air conditioning for a good hour. So that was a bucket of chuckles. Yeah. A nice roller coaster ride once we got flying because of all the turbulence, which was really, really fun. I was telling the girl next to me to put up her hands and just try to enjoy it. Yeah. And then the other beautiful thing was the landing. Normally, when you come in on a plane, you don't bounce. Yeah, and at least you shouldn't have quite such a hard thud. All right, so I trust everyone can hear me okay? All right, thank you guys for coming out. And this is basically just going to be a rant. The biggest issue that I have with creationism is the fact that and I know that my peers will have a very different opinion about this. Some of them want to argue that these people are sincere, and it's possible to be sincere, but I don't think it's possible to be sincere when you're a pro, not when you're doing creationism. So I became an activist back around Y2K in response to a number of concerted efforts to undermine science education, not just in my state, but nationwide. Referred to then as a culture war, it was and is a coalition of apologetics ministries and pseudoscience propaganda mills determined to spread misinformation.
Broken bones teach better lessons.
When I posted my video on the 10th foundational falsehood of creationism, a lot of people were interested in my use of what looked like a Phylogeny Explorer program. I've received several dozen requests for that software, but sadly that database does not yet exist. It was just an animation created to illustrate what is often an otherwise difficult concept to explain. I've had many requests to create it, and some have even volunteered their assistance getting it started, but it can't be produced easily or quickly in our spare time, not if we were to do it justice. Where I offered adequate funding, I would gladly devote my life to constructing the ultimate catalog of evolutionary phylogeny. Others have tried. For example, Miko's Phylogeny Archive is an impressive volume of work, full of citations and references, and has been occasionally updated for many years, but it is still unfinished. It still contains errors and is not peer-reviewed, which the author points out himself, much to his credit. Paleos.com was another vast and encompassing project. It was a splendid online encyclopedia for anyone interested in evolution, paleontology, or systematics, and it was full of dated depictions and artwork that were unavailable anywhere else. Sadly, that project was also an unfunded private venture. It no longer exists in its original grandeur, although a few skeletal remnants of it have been converted to a wiki. That leaves the Arizona Tree of Life project as the best phylogeny primer available online. It is easy to navigate and is nicely illustrated and was even peer-reviewed back when it was still being created. But it too is unfinished. It was never as complete as Miko's work, nor anywhere near as rich as Paleo's, and it has been in need of significant updates since the 20th century. The human genome was completely sequenced in 2003, 8 years after the last update to this page. Since then, we've sequenced many more genomes and have learned much more than we ever could have from morphology alone. Most of the new data confirms what we already knew, of course, but there were a few corrections and a couple surprises. First of all, as we learned in a previous video, pangolins are actually nested among carnivores and creodonts. Edentata turned out to be polyphyletic and was consequently recategorized as the superorder Xenartha. Remember that we also learned in an earlier video in this series that Ferae is closely associated with condylarths and hoofed animals. Horses and aardvarks had to swap places too, because it turns out that aardvarks are more closely related to elephants and manatees, and that they all belong together in another superorder which is not as closely related to other hoofed animals as carnivores and pangolins turned out to be. Two other eutherian superorders were identified, Laurasiatheria and Euarchontogliers. Of course, the latter of these is made of gliers and archontids. There were changes here, too. Dermoptera turned out to be closer related to primates than Scandinia, which isn't surprising, given the hypothesized relationship between primates, flying colugos, and bats. But now that we've sequenced a few bat genomes, the surprising thing is that they turned out not to be as closely related as we once thought. They're not even archontids. They're in a different superorder, being more closely aligned with insectivores. This was a point of contention in taxonomy for some time. If we had only microbats to look at, we probably would have classified them correctly, but there are megabats too, and they look quite different. There's so much like basal primates inside and out that it was once thought that they might even be primates. Megabats seem to have more in common with colugos than they did with microbats, so it was even argued that Chiroptera was polyphyletic and that both groups evolved independently, convergently. Now we know that they are monophyletic and that the convergent form is actually the colugo. Tracing genetic orthologs allows us a means of confirming and, if necessary, correcting taxonomic trees that were previously constructed on morphological homologies alone. So the more we learn about comparative genomics, the more these relationships will be precisely defined. Now let's get ourselves in order and see how genomic analyses line up with each other, with homologies, and with the fossil record. The earliest primate fossils date to 56 million years ago, less than 10 million years after the demise of the dinosaurs, but they certainly didn't look much like primates yet. At that time they, like the microbats, were barely distinguishable from shrews. Modern tree shrews are a sort of living fossil, being a karyotype of the earliest ancestors of both rodents and primates. That's why Disney rendered theirs so squirrel-like. They're about as generalized as it is possible for a placental mammal to be. Everything from aardvarks to zebras were derived from similar stock, and so were we. So onto this template we will fix the definitive traits of primates, and on the modified template we will add more specific traits for each of the descendant subsets. There are two distinct forms of primates, a relatively primitive, apparently basal branch, and another group increasingly advanced. Long before we discovered genetics, we knew these two groups must be related, but we had no fossils to link them until we finally found this one from 47 million years ago. Now that we've connected the wet-nosed primates to the dry-nosed primates, we focus back on our own branch. The next division is between tarsiers and anthropoids, meaning human-like primates, and of course that includes humans. This clade has another name too. Traditionally, it was called simiforms, meaning the monkey group. The earliest monkeys appeared in the fossil record around 34 million years ago and immediately divided into the New World and Old World varieties. The New World monkeys actually retain more primitive traits, while the Old World monkeys are comparatively modern by our standards. Proplyopithecoidea are the earliest Old World monkeys to appear in the fossil record, some 33 million years ago. We can't sequence their genes other than through their evident descendants in the current sister groups of Cercopithecoidea and Hominoidea. The hominoid group divides again between the lesser apes, being gibbons and siamangs, and the great apes, which of course includes humans. Now, as it was with ancestral monkeys, we had lots more species of apes in the fossil record than we have now, just like we had lots more species of human than we have now. We can't sequence their genes either, but the relationships we'd expect them to confirm are already obvious. Creationists believe that Australopiths shouldn't be classified as hominins, humans, despite our nearly identical morphology and obvious evidence of evolution, owing to some imagined genetic barrier, the last ditch of the desperate in denial. Of course, they say this having to ignore the molecular phylogeny of living primates published by the Public Library of Science, which exactly confirms our position amongst the great apes and our genetic proximity to chimpanzees, which we had already determined by other means. We're so close to chimpanzees that it might still be possible to produce living hybrids. Using laboratory techniques, we've done it with more distantly related species than that, but no one has yet conclusively determined whether we're still chemically interfertile with chimps or not. No one really wants to prove it either, because most of us don't even want to know the answer to that question. So it is still safe to call chimpanzees a different species, regardless whether we could interbreed with them or not. But all this implies that fertility between much more human-like Australopiths and primitive men was a virtual certainty.
All right, but you're so damned ugly.
An enemy has been slain.
Genomics not only confirm our phylogeny, but the evolutionary mechanisms involved as well. For example, beneficial mutations have been precisely defined and positively identified. Some of these have been shown to increase complexity and even add new genetic information, depending on how you define that. But beneficial mutations were the result of genetic deletions, too. While studying human-specific loss of regulatory DNA and the evolution of human-specific traits, scientists were able to isolate 510 deletions from the ancestral primate genome, which also caused significant regulatory changes, including, among other things, improvements in the sexual characteristics of monogamous mates. Even the expansion of specific regions of the human brain can be correlated to a deletion of genes from the primate genome.
First of all, this is a loss of a gene, a loss of information. Gee, notice a trend here?
Yes, the obvious implication is that having a couple chromosomes fused or having certain genes deleted does not necessarily equate to having less genetic information. Here we see again that creationist arguments are consistently always wrong. How many more ways can we prove that and prove it conclusively? Here's my favorite way. Creationists usually accept that taxonomy is superficially accurate, but they'll only concede that to a degree, because they insist that their God miraculously conjured a series of definitely different kinds of animals which were each specially created separate from each other. Creationists allow that each of these kinds have since diversified, but only within mysterious limits which they refuse to originally define. And they say that no lineage could ever be traced beyond their alleged original archetypes. However, they're unable to identify what those kinds are, how many there are, or how they could be recognized. I would challenge them to show me their mystic divisions amongst the following taxa. Are mallards related to puckers, wood ducks, and muscovies? Are all ducks also related to geese and other anseriforms? Are anseriforms related to galliforms and other neonates? Are neonates related to paleonates? Are any extant birds related to Hesperornis, Ichthyornis, Enantiornis, or other Euornis? Are Euornis related to Confuciusornis or Archaeopteryx? Are all early aves related to Microraptor, Velociraptor, or other non-avian dinosaurs? Are dinosaurs related to pterosaurs, phytosaurs, and other archosaurs? If evolution from common ancestry is not true, and some flavor of special creation of different as yet unidentified kinds is true, then there would be some surface levels in the cladogram where you would accept an actual evolutionary ancestry. But there must also be subsequent levels in that twin-nested hierarchy where life forms would no longer be the same kind and wouldn't be biologically related anymore. At that point, they would be magically created separate kinds and distinctly unique from those listed around it, as well as those apparently ancestral to it. So, are Bengal tigers related to Burmese tigers and all other tiger species? Are all known species of tiger related to each other and all other panthers? Are all panthers related to felines, scimitar cats, and other felids? Are felids related to nymphorids or viverids, and how could we tell? Are all Phalloidea related to any or all other members of the order Carnivora? Those who promote creationism's bewildering inanity should be able to show exactly where and why uniquely created kinds could not be grouped together with any parent clades which would otherwise only imply an evolutionary ancestry. Throw away any other argument you might be thinking about. None of them compared to this. If creationism is true of anything more than a single ancestor of all animal forms, if not the entire eukaryote collective, or if the concept of common ancestry is fundamentally mistaken, then there must be a point in the tree where taxonomy falls apart, where what we thought was related to everything is really unrelated to anything else. And unless you're a Scientologist or Aurelian, that criteria must apply to other animals besides ourselves. So, is the short-tailed goanna related to the Parenti and all other Australian goannas? Are all Australian goannas related to each other and to the African and Indonesian monitors? Are today's terrestrial varanids related to Cretaceous mosasaurs? Are varanids related to any other anguomorphs, including snakes? Are anguomorphs also related to skinkomorphs and geckos? Are all Sclerogosa related to iguanids and other squamates? Are all of Squamata related to each other and to all other lepidosaurs? Are all lepidosaurs related to placodonts and plesiosaurs? Are lepidosauromorphs related to archosaurs and other diapsids? Are all diapsids related to anapsids or synapsid reptiles like Dimetrodon? Are all reptiles related to each other and all other amniotes? Are all amniotes related to each other and all other tetrapods? Are all tetrapods related to each other and all other vertebrates? And so on. Which of these are related? Which of these are created? Remember, if there's any validity to creationism whatsoever, or if there's some critical flaw in the overall theory of evolution from common ancestry, that flaw must be found here, or it simply can't be anywhere else.
An enemy has been slain.
Estimates are that there are roughly 5,000 species of mammals alive today, plus more than 10,000 species of reptiles, not including birds, of which there are another 10,000 species or so. Then there are another 7,600 amphibians, amounting to roughly 33,000, mostly terrestrial tetrapods altogether. That doesn't account for fish or insects, with the vast majority of life on Earth, only the relative few that the biblical authors would recognize as having the breath of life. You see, back then, people didn't know that air was particulate matter. They thought air was a tangible spiritual life force, and that the act of breathing caused one to be infused with the spirit, which brings one to life, because they figured out that a lot of animals will die if they can't breathe. So the fable says that all the animals that had the breath of life would come to Noah to be saved from the flood. Thus, the first thought you might have is that Noah loaded 66,000 individual animals onto a box that couldn't possibly hold them all. Of course, the people who wrote this story weren't thinking globally. They had no idea that Australia or the Americas even existed, so they didn't know about penguins, polar bears, bison, wallabies, or three-toed sloths, which would never have been able to make the trip to Mesopotamia. Many islands have species that exist only there and nowhere else. How would they distribute them back again? How would they get the dragons to Komodo, tortoises to Galapagos, the tuatara back to New Zealand? At the time that this was supposed to have happened, there were still woolly mammoths on an island north of eastern Russia. The people who made up the story didn't know about any of them. They were only aware of a relatively few animals that lived in their immediate area, which their royalty might have kept in a menagerie. The story also says that Noah was supposed to load at least 7 pairs of each of the clean animals, meaning the livestock that they kept to eat. These would be herd animals that chew the cud and have a divided hoof, such as cattle, deer, goats, and sheep. But they also loaded domestic fowl like chickens, geese, ducks, and whatever other birds these people thought were good to eat. They brought at least 7 pairs of each of those, on top of 2 of every other kind of bird. So how many are we up to now? Who knows? The people who made up the story obviously didn't know, so how could we? How are they supposed to house walruses and sea turtles that can't be left in the ocean for a year and can't spend a year on a boat either? And what were all these things supposed to eat? As we mentioned in the last video, without refrigeration or any means of preservation, it would not have been possible to store enough food just for the livestock, not for a whole year. And there wasn't much thought given to the wild animals either. How do you feed them? What are koalas and anteaters and bats and earthworms supposed to eat? What about the termites? They're the only ones with abundant food, but they're not allowed to eat it. Well, parasites had plenty of food too, didn't they? Do you think these animals accidentally carried on only 1 male and 1 female of each species of fleas, ticks, lice, mites, mosquitoes, and intestinal worms? You think maybe God could have not given them a ticket to board? How can you have just 1 male and 1 female termite? or just 2 of every species of ant or bee. That just doesn't work. That's why Answers in Genesis ignores the insects, saying that they didn't have to be saved on the ark because they didn't have lungs. But they still breathe, and they'll drown, and we still have them. So if this fable was true, then how did they make it? And what about the predators? A single lion eats 10 pounds of meat a day. So for every individual carnivore of that size, you'd need to load another large 3,600-pound bovine just to last 1 year. Once you've got a few lions and hyenas, wolves and bears and other such things on board, there go all your clean animals. They'll have to share 1 cow every day with another waiting in line to be killed tomorrow. Even with just a few large predators, it would still take a herd of hundreds of cattle to last 1 year. And even if you could keep all the predators fed for the duration of the deluge, they'd eat up all the prey in the first month back on shore. There's just no way any of this works. If you see this as a provincial legend about a localized flood, then the proportions are not so absurd. But creationists tend to demand a worldwide flood with every species from every continent till the story no longer floats. Young Earth creationists go even further and throw dinosaurs in there too, along with every other terrestrial animal in the fossil record. They don't know what that means. It's not just that a couple of sauropods would have been too big for the ark all by themselves. It's that there are hundreds of species of dinosaurs and thousands more species of mammal-like reptiles, giant anapsids, terror birds, and several enormous ancient mammals which these religious extremists don't know anything at all about. Since young Earth creationists reject the entirety of geologic history, they're determined to make believe that everything was magically created all at once and that dinosaurs lived alongside people, at least in the Bible times. They're also determined to distort the Bible into mentioning dinosaurs. For example, the book of Job mentions Leviathan, Behemoth, and the unicorn. I know. The traditional joke is that the unicorn didn't make it on the ark, and that's why we don't have any today. But back in the Bronze Age, people had a very different idea of what a unicorn was. The Latin name of this animal is Diceros bicornis, and this one is called Rhinoceros unicornis. This is a unicorn. And bearing this in mind, read Job 39 again in the King James Bible. It makes a lot more sense when you see it as this instead of this. Likewise, the next chapter describes Behemoth as an elephant whose tail bends or sways like a Middle Eastern cedar. It does not describe the size of the tail, nor in any way imply that it should look like a North American cedar, nor could the authors have even thought that. Instead, they said that the sinews of his stones are wrapped together and his nose pierces snares. Or in other translations, they're trying to snare his nose. For these and other reasons, we know that this is an elephant. These traits are unique to elephants, and this is not the way anyone would describe a sauropod. But young Earth creationists insist on lying about that so they can try to make this into a dinosaur. If you read the next chapter, Job's description of Leviathan is obviously based on a Nile crocodile, albeit with some magical embellishments. Every other reference to a dragon is either talking about a snake or a multi-headed monster. There are no dinosaurs in the Bible. The only dinosaurs that ever lived alongside men are birds, and creationists refuse to admit the fact that birds are dinosaurs. But let's imagine for a moment that every species that ever lived was alive at the same time. There are so many genera evident in the fossil record that what we have left today represent only about 1% of everything that has ever lived. Thus, an already exaggerated tall tale goes from overloaded to overbloated and collapses under the weight of its own impossibility. Noah would need a fleet of arks that size, a whole navy. Not everything had to be on the ark because a lot of these were seagoing creatures, but then what happened to all the ammonites and trilobites, pliosaurs, plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, mosasaurs, placodonts, crinoids, eurypterids, and other things that are now entirely extinct? If God wanted to save any of these species, he certainly went about it the wrong way, didn't he? When Answers in Genesis built their fake ark in Kentucky, they quickly realized that they couldn't even house a decent zoo in the boat-shaped building, not without extensive and expensive provisions, more than any crew of 8 could have possibly managed or stored, even with modern appliances. And without air conditioning and much more ventilation than their fable allowed, everyone would have died of methane poisoning within the first couple of days. So, instead of including a zoo with real animals, which would have been a much better attraction, they opted to create a few dozen stuffed animals instead, which really wasn't worth the ticket price. These included a pair of dromaeosaurs, but without any feathers, of course, because they don't want people to know that dinosaurs were so bird-like. They know better, but they're not going to be honest about that because it's all about make-believe and they need to keep their people ignorant. They also had Mesohippus and Pachycetus and Chalicotherium, and the reason for that is confusing. Being forced to defend an increasingly obviously indefensible myth, young Earth creationists painted themselves into a corner and used an unlikely excuse as their only escape. They realized that evolution was the only explanation they could use to reconcile all these impossibilities. The fact that finally clued Darwin to the idea that one species could diversify into many was the discovery of a collection of finches from the Galapagos archipelago. All the island birds were derivations of a common ancestor on the mainland. So if you only had that archetype, then that one species is as good as the 14 that evolved from it. So AIG said that they didn't need tens of thousands of species on their ark, just a few common ancestors from which they could derive everything else. Creationists don't believe in gradual evolution over millions of years, but they'll evoke a super fast, hyper-accelerated evolution happening in only a century or so if they need that type of excuse. If one lineage of dogs could produce 100 or a couple hundred recognized breeds, then one lineage of bears could produce every other species of bear, and so on. So how many cats were on the ark? Surely they didn't have every species of cat known to man, not when they're all the same kind. Why would you have 2 felines and 2 panthers and 2 scimitar cats when you could derive all 3 groups just from one breeding pair of proto-kitties, like a pair of prehistoric nymphorids, for example? These are a group of almost cats from the Eocene epoch. How long would it take on a young Earth creationist timescale for these to evolve into all the cats we have today? Well, there's a problem with that. Answers in Genesis said the flood happened less than 4,400 years ago, but we already had depictions of both lions and leopards with different kinds of house cats long before then. So each of these species already existed before the flood that never happened. Likewise, Pachycetus is taxonomically basal to the entire ancestry of whales. But if you're going to allow evolution to derive all these descendants and whales could have been left in the ocean, then why would you include a whale ancestor on the ark? Oh, yeah, because the Magic Book of Fables says that whales were created as they are on the 5th day. But then, why did they have Mesohippus, an intermediate stage in the evolution of horses? Why not derive all horses starting from the beginning with Eohippus or Hyracotherium? In fact, if you went just a bit further, you could have had Cambatherium, a taxonomic precursor of horses, rhinos, and chalicotheres. So why did they have all 3 of those on the Ark encounter? Oh yeah, because their rhino cage was labeled unicorn. They had to do that in order to lend some credence to the fable. But the idea was that they could stock the boat with just a few basal precursors that could later branch into all the modern varieties. Well, except for dinosaurs, of course. They had already diversified into hundreds of species, and all of them became extinct immediately as soon as they stepped off the boat, along with more than 90% of everything else that ever lived. How's that for divine guidance? I know the Lord works in delirious ways, but having a shipment where almost everything is dead upon arrival is not survival. The creationists don't have a problem with microevolution, that's variation within species, but they're forbidden to admit macroevolution, which is variation between species, evolution at or above the species level. So they used to say that speciation was impossible until they found out that it has actually happened a bunch of times. So they moved the goalposts such that the evolution of a new species of finch are just changes within a kind. By mislabeling and misappropriating evolution in this way, Answers in Genesis figured they could generate every species alive today out of only 1,400 original archetypes on the Ark, which they consider to be specially or magically created kinds. The Bible never says what a kind is. It says there are many different kinds of all sorts of birds, but it doesn't say what a sort is either, nor why there are different kinds within a kind. Why aren't they all the bird kind? Otherwise, everything is either cattle or beasts or sea monsters or creeping things. The people who cobbled together the Bible had no idea how to classify anything, but they define things by what they do rather than what they are. So the Bible says that whales are fish and that bats are birds, and bats might occasionally be locusts too because of the way they swarm. Who knows? Of course, Now we have a way of classifying life forms by what they are, by analyzing their morphology, physiology, development, and genetics, which also allows that evolution can be traced, so that things can be classified by their ancestry indicated in the genome. We see this demonstrated with the molecular phylogeny of living primates, a computer-generated cladogram based on analysis of multiple types of genetic markers, which confirms our familial relationship as one of the great apes. Of course, we've sequenced the genes of other organisms too, and they show a similar pattern. Studies of louse DNA show that human head lice diverged from chimpanzee body lice at about the same time that humans diverged from chimpanzees. Not surprising. But human pubic lice diverged from gorilla lice, and much more recently. How awkward is that? Genomic research consistently reveals evolutionary patterns throughout zoology. For example, I made a two-part video series on the evolution of cats and another one on the evolution of dogs, in which I referenced a number of chemically constructed cladograms, including a massive collaborative analysis of the molecular phylogeny of Carnivora. This used two different types of genetic analysis to confirm that cats are definitely related to meerkats, bearcats, and polecats, as well as dogs, bears, seals, weasels, hyenas, and so on. So they're not different kinds, they're all the same kind. And so it goes, with genetic orthologs linking every animal group in an unambiguous family tree that is also connected to other forms of life. Everything about phylogenetics is an inconvenient truth for creationists trying to avoid the truth. But it gets worse. Genomic research also shows periods of population reduction, with measured mutation rates to indicate when. These are consistent enough that comparative genomics of different populations shows that about 12,000 years ago, some unidentified cataclysm wiped out about 3/4 of most large mammals. This is not concordant with the flood, either in timing or effect. Some species went extinct, some came through all right, but cheetahs barely survived, meaning that so few of them made it through that there was a population bottleneck causing a loss of genetic diversity. This left cheetah DNA with the deficiency of being effectively inbred. That was 12,000 years ago, thousands of years before the world existed, according to young earth science deniers, and cheetahs are still suffering this effect. Now, if there was a global flood, it wouldn't just be cheetahs. Every terrestrial vertebrate would be similarly deficient. Studies of the human genome show that we've experienced a number of bottlenecks too, mostly associated with migration, combined with a number of environmental factors. The most significant of these was more than 70,000 years ago, when the entire human population was reduced to only a few thousand individuals. Imagine how much worse it would be if it were ever down to just 2 individuals, one male and one female, such that all their descendants had to be incestuous. If there had ever been a global flood, then every species would be severely compromised by a lack of genetic diversity. If anything survived, and as we explained in previous videos, nothing would have made it past that, not even the animals on the ark. It's not like creationists are ever going to admit that anything ever proves them wrong, because everything does, and they've already made public statements to the effect that they don't care what the truth is. They're going to close their eyes to that and make believe whatever they want to believe. So what they did was adapt Linnaean taxonomy into a bogus pseudoscience called baraminology. This holds that normal taxonomic hierarchies of evolution are correct, and thus the phylogenetic tree of life is correct, but only to a point. After which they say that everything comes down to an estimated 1,400 original kinds from which everything else is derived. But they will not disclose where that point is. It used to be the species level until they found out that speciation happens. Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis admits that he arbitrarily moves that point around, such that it is usually the species level, but sometimes he'll push it back to the family level, ignoring the fact that humans are still in the family of apes, which he's already said he will never admit despite any amount of proof to the contrary. This is critical. If evolution from common ancestry is not true, and some flavor of special creation of as yet unidentified kinds is true, then there would be some surface levels in a cladogram where you would accept an actual evolutionary ancestry, but there must also be subsequent levels in that twin-nested hierarchy where life forms would no longer be the same kind and wouldn't be biologically related anymore. At that point, they would be magically created separate kinds and distinctly unique from those listed around it, as well as those apparently ancestral to it. So creationists have to show at least a handful of these baramins and show how we can distinguish them from their parent categories. This is the phylogeny challenge, the most damning argument there is against creationism, and no creationists can meet that challenge because they know this mystic boundary they allude to isn't really there. They made it up in an attempt to deny an abundantly evident reality. When I took a college course in historical geology here in Texas, both of my instructors identified as Christian, but on the first day of class, they said, if you believe in Noah's flood now, you won't by next week. And they proceeded to show substantial geological evidence inconsistent with and contradicting flood models of religiously motivated pseudoscience. Likewise, I asked Wildwood Claire to help me with this video. She's a geologist active in the atheist community. She's made several videos showing how geology disproves the Noachian flood fable, and I'll include those links here. But she referred me to another geologist, Tim Helbel, who identifies as Christian. In one of the recommended sources, Helbel wrote that most of the pioneering natural scientists and geologists of the Renaissance and late modern era, a group which included many pious Christians, expected that their fieldwork would provide evidence of the biblical flood, reflecting a catastrophic event in Earth's history of only thousands of years. However, as they discovered the interrelated dynamic processes of the rock cycle and pieced together Earth's history from the vertical sequence of rock layers around the world, they concluded that the Earth must be older than thousands of years. Furthermore, they couldn't identify a single layer of rock or sediment that fit with the global flood occurring early in human history. By the early 20th century, most leading Christians accepted the great age of the planet Earth. For example, notes in the popular Scofield Reference Bible, published in 1909, provided an old Earth interpretation of Genesis 1. Helbel goes on to explain how creationist pseudoscientists radically rejected modern geology to erroneously attribute every geological formation to a global flood that evidently never happened. But he notes that the overwhelming majority of geologists, including Christian geologists who affirm the authority of the Bible, reject the flood geology narrative. To that, I would add that less than 1% of Earth and Life scientists give any credence to creationism, and that the only people who do cite religious reasons following their childhood indoctrination, not the evidence. Andrew Snelling is a perfect example of that. In 1990, he documented an erosional period of more than 100 million years on a rock formation that he himself determined to be billions of years old. He detailed all the evidence and methods leading to this conclusion and submitted these findings to scientific journals where it would be peer-reviewed. But at the same time, he was also writing articles for the Creation Science Foundation, which would become Answers in Genesis. Therein, he pretended to refute his own current observations, minus the evidence and methodology, of course. In those articles, he said that the Earth was only 6,000 years old, simply because he thinks the Bible says so, and he said that nearly everything in geology should somehow be blamed on a global flood. This is because of what he wants to pretend, rather than what he can show to be true. His position is all about make-believe. To work at Answers in Genesis, scientists have to submit a signed copy of their statement of faith, promising to adhere to that and swearing to promote Christianity regardless what the facts are, since they're statement of faith also says that they will never accept nor even consider any evidence that proves them wrong. Yes, they really are that openly dishonest. Sincere scientists don't and won't swear to defend any given position no matter what, the way Andrew Snelling did. In fact, science is the antithesis of faith, working exactly opposite of the way religion does. Andrew Snelling cannot defend his position from an evidentiary basis, neither in peer-reviewed publications nor even in a debate format against mainstream geologists. Yet he remains a pitiful example of professional failure that is the very best that creationists can produce in their defense. Seriously, this credulous, disreputable, self-contradicting sellout to imaginary fantasies really is the best they've got. Creationists don't care what the facts are, and only assume their conclusions for religious reasons. They're authoritarian. They don't want to know about the data, they just want to hear proclamations from authority. That means that I would have to cite professional geologists in this rebuttal of the flood fable. It doesn't matter what I say. I do have some direct first-hand experience doing paleontology, both in the lab and in the field, but my eyewitness account isn't good enough for those who only respect the credentials of academic authority. So in this video, I will only recite or relay arguments provided by degreed geologists. Fortunately, I'm not limited to one or two defenders of the faith like creationists are. There were a few geologists who volunteered to assist in this endeavor, such that I will have to divide this video into two sections. And even if I keep everything succinct, they'll probably still be longer than the 10 minutes I originally intended. So this video is how geology disproves Noah's flood, and the next video will be how paleontology disproves Noah's flood. For the rest of this video, my material comes from former Ken Ham reading creationist Hal Hackett. He has a Master of Science in Geology from Northern Illinois University and says that none of his graduate work in paleoclimatology could have been remotely factual if there had been a worldwide flood. He also has a Bachelor of Science from Wheaton, a Christian college that has taught Old Earth geology continuously since the 1890s. For every one of Andrew Snelling, there are dozens of evangelical Christian geologists, just counting Wheaton alumni. The school itself is officially creationist and contains a lot of diverse creationist views, but in the natural sciences department, you suddenly stop finding young earthers. Telling, isn't it? The people in touch with the relevant evidence believe in geologic time. Even in a school where almost 100% of the social network is evangelical Christian. These students do not reject creation science because it's good for their social lives. They do it because the evidence compels them, even when they have their God glasses on. The central claim of flood geology is that billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth, provide evidence of a worldwide flood maybe 5,000–10,000 years ago. It's worth remembering that this is exactly what the scientific community assumed in the 1700s. Since then, geology has emerged and developed into a unified body of understanding based on numerous interdependent fields, which in turn are composed of the hotly debated work of hundreds of thousands of active researchers. And none of that research makes any sense except for how it relates to all the rest. But the young Earth creationists who helped start geology didn't know about two things: Earth history and plate tectonics. And we'll consider Earth history a little more closely in the next video. For now, we'll just look at tectonics. Creationists today don't have a problem with Pangea. Pangea is the shape the Earth took when the dinosaurs arose, and creationists like to use dinosaurs as missionary lizards to evangelize children. There's something like a flood geology consensus between Answers in Genesis and Institute for Creation Research that Pangea is what the world looked like right up until God hit the reset button. They think that the last 300 million years of continental drift happened all in 1 year, with more destructive force coming from tsunamis than from rainfall, and ocean basins deepening to collect all the water at the end. Creationists don't have much problem with the separation of South America and Africa, but they have no idea that East Antarctica and North America were together 2 billion years previously, because they don't have a view of how continental drift brings the continents together naturally every several hundred million years. There were 6 supercontinents before Pangea, most of which only saw single-celled life. And the reason why that matters is that for flood tectonics to be true, then either 1, 3.5 billion years of tectonics would have to happen all in 1 year, or 2, God skipped the 3.2 billion years and started the cycle at Pangaea. Now, when plate tectonics happens, the ocean crust gets subducted, dragged under the continent crust down into the Earth's mantle. And sometimes we can use geophysical techniques to peek down into the mantle and see remnants of a subducted oceanic plate. It's actually rare to get a good look because they only last so many tens of millions of years. But if flood geology is honest, then the mantle should be full of spent oceanic slabs, all in exactly the same condition. Structural geology is the field of study for how rock bodies behave under the stresses of burial, and it would be largely non-existent with flood tectonics. Solid substances, like rocks, have to behave differently under different timescales. For a rock to bend, with new crystals forming simultaneously in the free space on the outside of the bend, chemical exchanges have to happen one by one. So it takes a lot of time to accumulate much change. If the chemistry were to happen faster, the rock would be liquid, not solid. If you could compress 300 million years of mass movement into a single year, the deformation would be brittle. You would still need sources of kinetic energy. Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis thought it was funny when my wife and I said that people are animals, and more specifically apes, and we showed him how to confirm for himself that this really is how humanity is currently and correctly categorized. But that's just according to science, and what do all these expert specialists really know about it anyway? I gave a speech in Canada recently where I talked about how religion reverses everything, and we're seeing a demonstration of this on Ham's Facebook account. I can't turn to show it because I'll lose the mic, but okay. I've selected a few comments to share here. Down at the bottom left, we have one that says, "They claim to be evolved. They claim others are apes. Racism. Does anyone not see this?" This is how out of touch his audience is. The one I think just above that is, "Evolution teaches those who believe in it to hate all those who disagree." No. Evolution never taught anyone to hate anything. Teaching hatred is religion's job. That's why Ken Ham posted this image on Answers in Genesis, wherein he associates evolution, or belief in evolution, with everything evil. Let's see, he's teaching creationists to hate everyone who don't believe as they do. They teach that anyone who doesn't believe in creationism is a radical feminist, commie, Nazi, racist, drug-abusing, pornographic pervert. And now, communism is traditionally atheist, and religion is typically misogynist, but apart from those two, creationists actually make up the majority of all those other categories. Or most of them. There's one or two that don't belong there at all. They have abortion listed as a direct consequence of accepting evolution too. Never mind that students of private religious schools where evolution is not taught are statistically more likely to get abortions than their peers in public schools. They have euthanasia in here too, and I can't pin that on them because euthanasia is when life is ended out of mercy, often with consent or even at the request of the person in question. And when has religion ever played that game? That's why euthanasia is the only form of killing that the Bible doesn't endorse. And creationists use a different dictionary than we do. When they talk about evolution, they mean all the sciences which contest young Earth creationism, and of course, that's all science. And this artist apparently doesn't know what uniformitarianism means. I suspect he got that confused with methodological naturalism, because they want to create the illusion that anyone who accepts natural science will also hold to humanism and anti-theism at the same time as New Age religions and paganism, as if those were different things. And none of these are related to evolution, and a couple are redundant, and you can't hold all of them at the same time. They also intentionally ignore the fact that many Christians accept evolution also. And remember, creationists don't actually worship a god, they worship a book. because it is the book that must be infallible, not the deity. And notice also that they do not promote belief in creation on the grounds that it is actually true. I think even they know that it's not, that it's a matter of make-believe. They have to pretend that it is true. In his criticism of my wife, Ken Ham explained it thus: "It is sad that many children today are taught that they are just animals, as this atheist believes. If they are just animals and the Bible's account of creation is not true, then there is no basis for moral absolutes." See, according to Ken, whether you believe it matters more than whether it is true. And I think even Ham knows that on some level, the Bible is not true, neither in whole nor in part. And it's a good thing, too, since there's nothing in the Bible that qualifies as morality. If you use the Bible as a moral guide, you will be arrested in every nation in the civilized world. All you need for moral absolutes is a universally accepted definition of morality, and atheists have that. A particular action or choice is moral or right if it somehow promotes happiness, well-being, or health, or if it somehow minimizes unnecessary harm or suffering, or both. A particular action or choice is immoral or wrong if it somehow diminishes happiness, well-being, or health, or if it somehow causes unnecessary harm or suffering, or both. And of course, I got these from Scott Clifton. He does a wonderful treatise on morality. You should look it up on the internet. And of course, all this just proves my point that the God of the Bible is absolutely immoral. And going back to Ham's Facebook, we get another bit of brilliance. One of the posters here says, "Apes don't even have the same DNA." Well, this stuff cracks me up. If humans are related, then how did the ape DNA change itself? What a lost world. Thank you, Lord, for your Son's love for us and your redemption through him. What meaningless, unintelligible dribble. Looking at this comparison of chromosomes, it seems that we do have the same DNA. And in fact, there's more difference between gorillas and chimps than there is between chimpanzees and humans. Looking over the entire genome, we match up pretty well, but especially up to the point where the chimpanzee chromosomes fused their 2 into our 1. There we have an impressive match on both sides. But there is no evidence good enough for those desperate to deny reality, who prefer to live in a world of pure imagination. Another of Ham's followers commented on his Facebook page, "So terrible, isn't it? Please pray for these lost souls. How could anyone be so silly as to group an organism according to its taxonomic traits and then apply the same standard to those in the image of God?" Apart from my recognition of this guy's special pleading and assumed conclusions, my first response would be to note that man created God in his own image, and even the Bible says in Ecclesiastes 3:18-21, that men are but animals, and that all else, all this image of God nonsense, is but the product of human vanity. Another of Ham's followers admits that crowding of teeth is to blame, though he doesn't understand why crowding happens. He says it's a diet thing, not an ape thing. And someone else commented that our classification system was developed by fallible humans. Apparently, this person wants science to seem flawed, arbitrary, and uncertain. Now, to be fair, that the Bible, like all other supposedly holy scriptures, was conceived and composed, compiled, edited, and adapted, revised, and reinterpreted by mere fallible men, and there is no indication that any higher intelligence or benevolent being had anything at all to do with any part of that composition. That's just the fact of the matter, and if you believe otherwise, you're just fooling yourself. The first of these classification systems was devised by a very fallible human. In fact, it was the work of a creationist. It was based on a suite of diagnostic traits, only some of which were arbitrary, and still he was quite frustrated at the fact that he could not distinguish humans from apes, nor apes from humans either. He thought we were all the same kind. Another arbitrary element was added when other creationists insisted on creating 2 sister sets to represent what should have been one taxonomic family. It was the only way that they could create the illusion that man was distinct from the other apes. That bogus taxon lasted nearly 300 years, but finally, very recently in fact, collapsed under the new system, cladistic phylogenetics. It's not the uncertain method that Linnaean taxonomy was. This is more of an objective analysis of molecular data that can be fed into a computer and turn out either confirmation or correction of evolutionary ancestry, effectively like running a genetic paternity test. It was this unbiased clinical comparison of DNA which confirmed that the old taxonomic rates were wrong, and now we can be absolutely certain that we really do belong to the same phylogenetic clade as the other apes and all that that implies. Ken Ham said he couldn't believe that we, my wife and I, would regurgitate what he calls a ridiculous, outdated, and false idea that wisdom teeth are evidence of evolution. Although there are many peer-reviewed mainstream biology papers disproving every part of Ham's criticism, let me cite just a couple from the last few years. This first one, submitted in 2011, talks about the gracialization and diminution of the chewing muscles in human evolution and an increased density of the mandibular bone in modern humans, apparently in response to the low magnitude yet high frequency demands of articulate speech. This one from 2006 says, and I quote, "A reduced number of molars may be advantageous from a human evolutionary perspective because of the dramatic lifestyle and diet shift experienced since the discovery of fire and the development of cooking utensils. Third molars, which would have been essential for the survival of earlier hominids, became not only functionless, but also an important cause of morbidity in modern humans. Dental arches have reduced over hominid evolution. As a result, third molars became frequently impacted or malpositioned, preventing the teeth from attaining a functional position. Furthermore, because of the difficulty of cleaning them and keeping them free of disease, impacted or malpositioned third molars led to a higher susceptibility of periodontal disease, such as infections, carious lesions, cysts, tumors, and the destruction of adjacent teeth and bone. These problems led some authors to raise the probability of a complete elimination of these teeth in humans, and studies for intentionally stopping third molar growth for possible clinical application are being carried out." End quote. What this study shows is that the formation of the third molar or wisdom tooth is controlled by a Hox gene called PAX9, which is widely conserved among primates and some other mammals. In fact, ours is almost exactly identical to that of gorillas. The study notes that a particular heterozygous transversion mutation of the PAX9 homeobox gene, substituting alanine for proline, will result in the agenesis of the third human molar, meaning that wisdom teeth will simply never develop, and this is why not everyone has them. What's interesting about this beneficial mutation is its pattern of occurrence. We humans would like to prompt this mutation across humanity so that no one has to risk deleterious morbidity if their jaw isn't quite big enough for all those teeth. That's the way any omnipotent, benevolent, intelligent designer would do it. But evolution doesn't have a goal in mind. It uses blind mechanisms of random mutations emerging amid naturally selective patterns imposed by population mechanics. What you get from that are variable probabilities of this mutation occurring according to however favorable genetic propensities are across a wide range of given genes, and this is what we see. To determine whether this gene is polymorphic in humans, they sequenced 86 individuals sampled from Asian, European, and Native American populations, and this was the range that they found. This indicates an evolutionary pattern with no indication of intelligent design. This next article reads as follows. Powerful masticatory muscles are found in most primates, including chimpanzees and gorillas, and were part of a prominent adaptation of Australopithecus and Paranthropus, extinct genera of the family Hominidae. In contrast, masticatory muscles are also considerably smaller in both modern and fossil members of Homo. The evolving hominid masticatory, that's a hard word to say several times. Masticatory muscles are considerably smaller in both modern and fossil members of Homo. The evolving hominid apparatus, traceable to a late Miocene chimpanzee-like morphology, shifted toward a pattern of gracilization nearly simultaneously with accelerated encephalization in early Homo. In other words, they're saying that as our ancestors' chewing muscles got smaller, their brains got larger at the same time, and they show a correlation here. To continue, here we show that the gene encoding for predominant myosin heavy chain, MYH, expressed in these muscles was inactivated by a frame-shifting mutation after the lineages leading to humans and chimpanzees diverged. Loss of this protein isoform is associated with marked size reductions in individual muscle fibers and entire masticatory muscles using the coding sequence of the myosin rod domains as a molecular clock. We estimate that this mutation appeared approximately 2.4 million years ago, predating the appearance of modern human body size and emigration of the Homo from Africa. This represents the first proteatomic or proteomic distinction between humans and chimpanzees that can be correlated with a traceable anatomic imprint in the fossil record. End quote. Now, what's all that mean? Never mind. There isn't time to explain all that. Suffice it to say that if we have a gene called MYH16, which is common to all primates, monkeys, gorillas, lemurs, and so on, we have it too. And there's no reason why we should if we were created in the image of God. Like everything else in biology, this too only makes sense in light of evolution. We have in our genome a primate pseudogene. It's broken. It's dysfunctional molecular vestige of our evolutionary ancestry. It's there. It makes a protein, but the protein doesn't work. When this primate gene is disabled, as it is in humans, what happens is that much of the massive muscles that would have given gorillas tremendous bite pressure only allow us the barest fraction of that. An associated symptom of that is that we no longer have these huge jaw muscles, then we wouldn't develop a sagittal crest to anchor them to either. And the cranial pressure there apparently prevented the brains of other simians from enlarging the way our brains have. So one of the reasons that we are so smart is that we have so many useless monkey genes that don't work. How's that for being created in the image of God? This final slide did not come from a peer-reviewed journal. It came from a biology course lecture given at the University of Madison, Wisconsin this year, 2013. So, Mr. Ham, regarding the current scientific consensus, wisdom teeth definitely are vestigial evidence of evolution, and that is neither ridiculous, outdated, nor false. In his video mocking us, Ken Ham included what he called an answer to that. And I checked it out, expecting to find some twisted distortion of actual research, quote mined and spun, and misrepresented by the Institute for Creation Research or something like that, since that's the best creationists can ever throw at me. Ham's answer, however, wasn't what I expected. I must say that it is rare to have such low expectations and still be disappointed. He says, the comment about wisdom teeth once again illustrates the ignorance of atheists concerning the origins issue. Losing something is the opposite of molecules to man evolution, which requires new information being added to the genome to produce a characteristic not previously possible. First of all, Ken, regarding our alleged ignorance on the origins issue, you cannot claim to have done something again if you've never done it before. And I would venture to guess that I have probably forgotten more about this subject than you will ever know. For example, I at least have the ability to define what evolution is and how it works. And all of the university-level science courses on this topic show that I am right. And all of them illustrate your ignorance on this issue again and again. Secondly, while geneticists have positively identified new de novo genetic information emerging in the human genome, evolution also includes beneficial mutations resulting from the loss of information too. And I explained this in my video on the phylogeny challenge, which I posted over 2 years ago, and yet we still have no answers in Genesis. While studying the human-specific loss of regulatory DNA and human-specific traits, scientists were able to isolate 510 deletions from the ancestral primate genome, which also caused significant regulatory changes. One of these was the loss of tumor suppressor genes, resulting in the expansion of specific regions of the human brain, and which also left us more susceptible to brain cancer. Finally, unlike Mr. Ham, I can accurately describe what a vestige is. And just to be clear about that, let me first show you an example that was intelligently designed. Look at these two motorcycles. Notice that the one on the right has two gas caps. That's the classic style. And the one on the left has only one. Evolution is better understood in terms of economics than as continuously advancing progress, and the market tends to exert selective pressures of its own. For example, the market generally favors symmetry and versatility, but not redundancy. So while it used to be that you could fill up your bike from either side, newer bikes can only fill up on the right. But these are both newer bikes. Most folks would rather have the classic look even if one of the gas tanks doesn't open. And on some reason, Harley's the left cap is just a dummy. It doesn't do anything. On this particular one, it's been given a new function. It's a fuel gauge. But whether the left cap has a function or not, it no longer has the original function. It's still a left cap, but it's only a remnant of what it used to be, and that's what makes it vestigial. Now for some zoological examples, we'll start with a really obvious one, so familiar that you might never have noticed it. Anybody know why dogs have dew claws? The obvious evolutionary answer is that they used to have 5 fully functioning toes that all met the ground. This again has no explanation from the creationist world. This is not a divine design. There's another adaptation in here that a lot of people overlook when they look at the dew claw. Just above the word dew claw, you'll see that there's a heel pad. That is where the dog's actual heel is. Why would the dog's heel be located on a place that never touches the ground? And why would he have a claw on a toe that doesn't have any musculature to move it? These are remnants of when they used to be flat-footed, when they were plantigrade rather than digigrade. Once upon a time, the ancestors of both dogs and bears walked on their whole foot, and they looked remarkably like these guys. This is a wolverine. This is a kind of living fossil because once upon a time the fossil record was full of animals that bore this kind of shape in various sizes, including several that were identified as bear dogs, kind of indistinguishable between bears and dogs. And then if you want to go back into the vestiges about where their toes came from and why they are designed the way they are, once upon a time canids, bears, wolverines, weasels, and so on actually had prehensile hands. Very early carnivores still have them. Raccoons are a good example, and myocids, these are the ancestors of both dogs and cats. And then moving on a little bit further, you have a vestige, a remnant of what something used to be, like when the whalers would peel off the flippers and discover the bones underneath. There's a problem here. This is not the optimum design for a flipper for a whale when you're using the same bones and the same configuration that you would use in a human's hand or in the wings of a bat and so on. But it gets even weirder than that. Let's see, we have hands on a whale. We also have fingernails on the flippers of manatees. And again, that's not the only vestigial trait because you will also notice an elbow. And I forgot to include the slide on here, but we actually have the complete evolutionary transition for manatees, including one that has fully functioning feet, all 4 of them, and can still walk around on land. The entire lineage is now known from the fossil record. In another example, we have a partial evolutionary step from snakes. The reason that modern pythons sometimes maintain their claws toward the back by the cloaca is they are the remaining remnants of the hind legs. This is a Cretaceous snake, so they were already well on the way out. It doesn't have any legs on the front, but this and several other fossils have been found where the hind legs remain, and they remain in such a diminutive state, they're absolutely useless. And as I said, a vestigial limb does not have to be absolutely useless. It only has to be a remnant of what it was, and clearly that's what this is. There is no function that can perform. Sometimes the vestige that you have comes from something that has a completely different use, even if the use you have for it now is better than what you used to have it for. Notice how penguins use their wings for swimming, and they're so elegant at it, when once upon a time they used them for flying. They had another use before that. This is a fossil of an oviraptor. Originally, an oviraptor means egg thief, because they were always trying to associate with eggs because they're nesting animals. And they were thought that they were lizard-like things. Why would they sit on a nest? They're cold-blooded, so they must be stealing these eggs. However, when they found this fossil, and they found it sitting on its eggs like a chicken, with its arms draped over the eggs, they realized there's a problem here. First of all, clearly it's warm-blooded. There's no other reason to do this. But having just a naked arm over these eggs would afford no benefit unless you have a half wing. Now, Ken Ham likes to argue that there's no such thing as a half wing, and there's no evolutionary advantage for having one, but there is. And he's demonstrating it right there. The original wings that dinosaurs first developed and that birds later inherited were originally used for this purpose. Now look at the evolutionary advantage of being able to care for a larger clutch. When you're looking at simple population mechanics, this is a greater advantage than. And it also showed us that while we have no feathers on oviraptors, we know clearly that they have them. That oviraptors and velociraptors actually look more like this, which kind of ruins Jurassic Park for some of you. But now, well, while we don't know, or while we don't have the traces of feathers on oviraptors identified yet, we do have them on velociraptors. This is a comparison of the wings of turkey vultures and the bones that were found on the velociraptors, and they show the same telltale signs. We have the beginnings of what will become flight feathers anchored into the bones of these animals. These were feathered dinosaurs. Now, we actually have other dinosaur fossils for which we have the feathers fossil imprinted with them, but we don't usually get things as dramatic as this to show what their lifestyle was actually like. And then moving on again, what remnant does this lead to in modern animals? There's two types of birds alive now where there used to be, I think, 5. They are the Paleonace and the Neonace. The Neonace are the ones you're all familiar with. The Paleonace are the ostriches and emus and cassowaries and so on. This is my emu. That's my son embracing our emu. He loves that bird. And I discovered something curious about it. He doesn't have a wing. He has a naked arm. And on the end of that arm, he has one finger. At the end of that finger, he has a claw. Why? No purpose in having it. He has no musculature to move that arm. It is utterly useless. The only way that those arms move are when his ribs expand and retract in breathing. That's it. That's a vestigial limb. That's a vestige from being a dinosaur. And that's what that animal still is. Now, going back to Ham's website, because he knows about all this. And it's not about the data that he doesn't know. And it's not like if you were to show him the data that he would ever honestly change his mind. He's already dismissed all these things. A lot of the people on his Facebook give the impression that, hey, didn't we dismiss that or ignore that already last week? Why are they bringing that up again? Somebody posted here, says, I realize the area of theology on this site is creation, which I don't dispute. However, it seems illogical to accept, maybe even embrace this hatred, but I do. We are finally being hated because of Christ rather than because of us. Do you see the sheep are being separated from the goats? Romans 1:18-32 is going on right before our eyes. So stay strong in the faith, my friends. Ah, yes, the faith. The assumed conclusion, adopted without reason and defended against all reason. This is where Answers in Genesis advertises, announces, admits, as if it were something to be proud of, that they believe what they do for no reason, and that they will continue to defend that belief against all evidence to the contrary, and Answers in Genesis is not the only one making this admission, all creationist organizations post a similar statement of faith. Honesty is irrelevant. The truth literally does not matter. Whether you believe it matters more than whether it is true. It is a game of make-believe. Now, back to Ham. One of the other people on his board says, I don't think it's up here, while listening to this video, my 9-year-old says, this girl refuses to listen to reason or wisdom, but instead hears folly as it cries from the rooftops. Imagine a 9-year-old saying this. God has not allowed her to hear the voice of wisdom, huh, Daddy? The idea that God doesn't allow people to hear wisdom seems to be a consistent theme from Genesis 2 all the way through Scripture and for religious practices beyond that. Just as there is no morality in the Bible, there isn't much wisdom there either. Nothing that is both internally and externally consistent anyway, but I'll save that for another talk. The next commenter, and this one is the one I found most disturbing. I should mention this previous one when he said Romans 18 through 32, that if you read that, that's a complete reversal about what's going on. Nobody's hating these people. We're not separating sheep from goats. What that literally means, or what that passage talks about, is how we know there's a God, but we all want to be homosexuals, so we pretend that he doesn't exist. That's really what it's saying. That's how backward and insane that passage is. To say nothing of the fact that it's completely wrong, like the rest of the Bible is. Now, this person, even my 3-year-old son knows the truth, he says. Andrew, did we come from monkeys? Andrew, no eat banana. He has, the explanation is that he has watched A for Adam video a lot. And then the guy says, that's right. Is the earth millions of years old? And the tiny toddler says, no. Then hands me the Dinosaurs Genesis and Gospel DVDs. Me, Andrew, do you want to watch these? Andrew says, yeah. Points to dinosaur on cover. Says, be mean. Meaning behemoth. And this post is closed with the phrase, so proud. And that's the one that bothers me the most. This person is proud of how they've trained their child to parrot approved responses thoughtlessly and without understanding. This child does not know the truth because the parent does not know the truth, because they've turned to a source where truth cannot be found. This, too, is a topic for another time. Conditioning impressionable minds to be easily deceived and too readily believing impossible claims of incredulous people on insufficient evidence is not an accomplishment to be proud of, but that's how Answers in Genesis perpetuates. Ken Ham's followers criticize us for being concerned about how other people choose to deceive their children. Apparently, it is within a parent's rights to teach their kids that science is a satanic lie, that other races are inferior, that alien reptiles really run our government, or that Benjamin Franklin is the first king of America. You have a right to lie to your kids. I've actually seen people post that they have a right to be wrong. Ken Ham says the parents have a right to homeschool their children with religious nonsense all they want. In his hypocrisy, however, he complains that there are also secular homeschoolers and that they prefer to teach their children factual information. Of course, he doesn't phrase it that way. Factual information with practical application. Ken Ham thinks that's a shame. Indoctrination is not education. The two practices have opposite goals. And that's why I challenged Ken Ham to debate me on the merits of homeschooling factual accuracy versus the erroneous assertions of religious faith. Think of it as a moral issue. If it isn't factual, it isn't correct. Thank you.
none of it works. We've barely even started, but let's review. We are trying to explain just two phenomena, seasons and night and day. To do this, you have two different models, both of which are incompatible with observation, but furthermore, they are incompatible with each other. Why can't you even attempt to explain both of these phenomena at the same time? Going back to your day and night model, it's weird because you said that the sun moves between the tropics. Why isn't that shown here? Because if you did show that, you'd also have to change something about how far the light reaches, which would make this already absurd graphic even more absurd. Then, if we go back to the one for the seasons, why can't you show the dark half and light half while showing this? It's deliberately not shown because it would be obviously inconsistent. Therein lies the problem with the flat Earth model. You don't have one. You can't even explain two phenomena with the same model. The globe model has no problem doing this. This ball spins, so the half facing the sun is day and the other half is night. As it goes around the sun, the hemisphere receiving more direct sunlight experiences summer. The one with less experiences winter. That's right, sorry to burst your bubble, it doesn't correlate with the distance from the sun. Sunlight shining directly on the ground, more energy per square mile, hotter. Sunlight at an angle to the ground, same amount of energy distributed around a greater area, cooler. And there it is. Both the seasons and day and night are explained immaculately and, go figure, simultaneously. Honestly, I could stop right here. If you were to respond to this with anything other than a model that can explain at least those first two observations simultaneously, your viewers should find that very indicative of the fact that you don't have one. But while we're here, let's go through a few dozen more key points. Given that we're on the subject of models, let's hit the one you use for your explanation of the Coriolis effect.
You can kind of draw a clockwise orbit, Bob, in the middle there, and you can see how that this would cause. There you go. You know, if the sun and moon are moving in this, and they're diamagnetic and pushing water, causing tides, and then you've also got these winds that and storms that would, have to be what the sun and moon would cause.
Would have to be? How? You haven't explained anything. So the sun pushes water to get the air currents, and the moon pulls water to get the tides? Also, does the sun push the atmosphere in one direction to the right and magically in the other direction to the left? What about storm rotation, which is what this whole thing was about? You've made no attempt to even put the sun and moon in there and physically explain anything. You just say words relating to electromagnetism and hand wave it away.
No, Dave, we're not trying to claim that it's all caused by magnetism. My God, you extrapolate stuff that is just utterly ridiculous. We never said that, and they are electromagnetic phenomenon, like we have been claiming for a long time. Electromagnetic, like we have been claiming for a long time.
And another thing here, guys, even if we grant you this magnetic magic that you're looking for, it's still inconsistent with your model. Here's why.
The line going through the middle of the screen, if you picture the sun traveling from the right side of the screen to the left, it would create those same wind patterns above and below it.
Sorry, didn't you say that the sun moves from tropic to tropic? In that case, the boundary that divides the direction of storm rotation would also move from tropic to tropic. It doesn't. Storm rotation doesn't vary by the time of year. Also, why wouldn't compasses follow the sun through the sky? Also, why wouldn't storms speed up during the day while near the sun and slow down at night when the sun is away? Also, if you're claiming these southern winds are so incredibly fast, how is that possible if they're the furthest away from the source of the effect? None of it makes sense. In actuality, the Coriolis effect is just the result of basic physics relating to rotating bodies. That's why the equator is the dividing line. Pretty simple, don't you think?
Which makes a whole lot more sense than the Coriolis effect, being the reason in the heliocentric on the ball Earth for storms going in opposite sides of the equator. In fact, that is just silly when you think about that. That makes no sense whatsoever. It's ridiculous.
No.
Wow, very convincing counter-argument. Let's move on.
Astronomy and astrophysics and all of that, these aren't even real sciences. Okay, now you obviously are going to claim that they are, but the reason that they're not real sciences is because the only thing that you can do is observe them. You cannot test them, you cannot do anything to be interactive with them, you cannot generate hypotheses or experiments or anything like that. All you can do is simply observe.
Sorry guys, that's dead wrong. There are hundreds of examples I could choose, but I'll use this one. In the 19th century, we noticed irregularities in the orbit of Uranus. We realized these irregularities could be explained if there was another planet perturbing its orbit by gravitational influence. We did some math and predicted that there should be another planet in a particular place. We looked in that place, and what do you know? There it was. You can't get any more empirical than that. Do some math, make a prediction, the prediction is verified. The discovery of Neptune is a great example that corroborates Newtonian gravitational theory and demonstrates that astronomy is an empirical science, just like any other. It's not surprising that you don't understand this, because this is one of many instances that you demonstrate yourselves to be exemplars of the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is where your absolutely minimal experience has lured you into believing that you have expertise in a particular field, where in reality you are essentially incompetent. It is a cognitive bias that will be demonstrated many more times in this video. Now let's move on to another category. There are about 1,000 flat earth gotchas that all amount to an inability to understand conservation of momentum. These are your helicopters and planes arguments. Let's see which ones you're guilty of.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're doing an Olympic, say, long jump event, I would always opt to jump from east to west because, you know, where you're going to land should be racing towards you.
No. When you jump off the Earth or take off from the Earth, you retain the momentum imparted upon you by the rotation of the Earth. This has nothing to do with the atmosphere. It's also very easy to prove. Stand on the back of a moving truck. Jump up. What happens? Do you fly back off the truck at 30 miles an hour? No. You land right back where you started, even though the truck has moved forward while you were in the air. Why? Because in the air, you retain the forward momentum of the truck. When you jump off the Earth, or take off from the Earth, the same thing applies.
And of course, the globe earthers are going to say, well, you have your momentum that's lent to you by the Earth, spinning east, and you're going to retain that momentum forever. And the same thing applies to airline flights.
Yeah, you got it. So, are we good here?
But if you do a test on a train, or like you said, on a plane, and just simply jog from the front of a moving train to the rear and maybe time yourself or just observe, and then do the same thing running or jogging to the front of the moving train. I've done this myself. I promise you that you'll find that it is much easier.
On July 7th, I met with Kentucky State Director of American Atheists Jim Helton in protesting the opening of the Noah's Ark theme park. Helton, who is also president of the Tri-State Freethinkers, had arranged a very successful protest with a few dozen positive participants, including the president of American Atheists, David Silverman. But there were counter-protesters there, too, like this stool sample, Eric Hovind, son of the infamous convicted fraud, Kent Hovind. Such a pity that evangelicals don't believe in birth control. Hovind's usual game is to use his natural talent at irritating people so he can record them and edit their answers to the wrong questions and so on, trying to make reasonable people sound as unreasonable as he is. That obviously didn't work when he tried that with me.
So give me some reasons, because right now I haven't heard any reason. All you said is I object. Yes. So I haven't heard any reason. And why are you guys here? I understand that.
Life sits to a victim, comes up making you look dumb. That's his job, is to make you look dumb.
I understand that. Well, here, you make us look dumb then. You guys go ahead.
You don't need my help.
Yeah. So you don't want a dialogue about this, Art? You don't want any dialogue about why are you protesting?
People. You're a professional criminal.
Okay, there's a lot of criminals around here. That's not true.
You're a con.
So I'm a professional criminal, is your claim.
Scammer.
So we've got an ad hominem attack so far. Do you have anything debate-worthy? Why do you object to the art?
Snake oil, you'd be on that market.
So why do you object to the art?
Because it's immoral to lie to children.
I agree that it's immoral to lie to children. Now, they're not lying to children.
We know that art never happened.
Actually, we do.
Actually, we do know that it never happened.
No, we know that it actually did happen.
That it did not happen. I'm not having it.
Okay, give me some details on that, because give me some data on that. I mean, I could make the statement, I know it did happen. You're making the statement, I know it did happen. Now, if you'd like, Aaron, I will pay for you to go through that ark and show you the scientific evidence that is there in that ark. Would you like to walk through that with me? I will pay for you. I'll pay for you and for your wife.
So the steel rivets.
I'll let somebody else take you through.
All of the modern plain wood.
I'll let somebody else
all
take
the
you
cranes,
through.
the trucks.
You know what?
As opposed
At
to
12
one
o'clock, we're gonna
600-year-old
have
man
an expert
with
on
3
the ark
untrained
here.
laborers
Will you
using only
engage with
primitive
discussion?
tools from the Stone Age.
Now, how do you know
To
that?
have 1,400 breeding pairs at least.
How do you know that?
Which is supposed to be a hell of a lot more. But you know, young Earth creationists don't believe in macroevolution over millions of years, but somehow they do believe in a turbocharged, super, uber, hyper-caffeinated electro-mega evolution
So
happening
you
in only
are
100
willing to go through that and disprove all the science that's in there? Because
There's
you're a
no
man of
science
science,
in
right?
it.
You like science?
Right, there's no science in it.
I love science too. I got
That's
one of my
a fable.
signs here that says Christians love science. I love science.
That's an
Would
irony. No,
would
you do not. You absolutely do not love science. Very
Okay,
anti-science.
I said that to you. Well, Aaron, you
So
don't
if you
love
want to
science.
demonstrate how realistic the flood is,
Let's
have the
really
1,400 animals, live
Let's
animals,
really dialogue.
not 40 stuffed animals. Have 1,400 live animals. Have a year's supply of fresh water without purifier.
It
Have
rained
a
for
year's
40 days and 40 nights. There's plenty
on
of fresh
salted
water
water.
around.
Yeah, and it only rained for 40 days and 40 nights. They were full for a year. So that means they have to have a year's supply of fresh water. Because there's also a lot of dead things now all over the water. So you have to have fresh water. So on top of that, you also have
I know. Plenty of fresh
it was an
water.
impossible flood that we know didn't happen.
No,
we know
we
that
don't.
from
We know
genetic
that it
tests
did happen.
and multiple analyses of associated artifacts, we know
Mitochondrial
that
age,
people in
Y
Western
chromosome
Congress,
Adam,
in
we
Native
know it all
Americans,
came from
were
one.
already
We know
there thousands of years before any date given for the
So
flood.
do you want any civil dialogue? Or no?
And so we know
None?
that those people are still there, were never drowned out. The Egyptians too, they didn't drown either. They went right into their second dynasty, as
Do you
if it never
realize
even happened.
there are 350 legends of the flood around the world
And there's
today?
not one in
Every
Japan,
single
because Japan
culture
never had a flood
has a
legend
legend of
like
the
that.
flood.
But the
So
legends
this
that
is
they do have are all
interesting. This
different.
provides
Like in
evidence
one
that we're
where you have people turning into fish and then turning back into people, and then another one where 2 people only, and no animals survive this one. There's only 2 people survive by hiding in a clamshell. So the flood legends are all different, except,
you know what?
Except
They
when you
address
get
that
into
in
the area of
go
the
look at
Iraqi
it.
floodplain, which is called Iraqi floodplain for a reason.
You
Because
want
of
to go
flood.
address the flood that with me in the
The
ark?
Bible says that the depth of the flood, the Bible says that the depth of the flood was 15 cubits or 22 feet, which is the same depth that is given in the Epic of Gilgamesh and Atrahasis. The Sumerian flood.
They address that
the
too. You
Sumerian
wanna go
king
in there
list
and talk
also
about the
talks about
science with me?
Utnapishtim, Ziasudra, Atrahasis, and so forth. We know that they are all talking about the same flood. Now somehow, 15 cubits of water is supposed to cover Mount Ararat, which stands 2.5 miles high.
The problem is you're assuming Mount Ararat existed at that time.
So
It
you're
didn't
telling me
exist
that
at time.
because Mount Ararat is a volcano,
Correct.
and you want to tell me that it just caused this volcano. So a 2.5 mile high volcano just formed just now, and you're going to land a wooden boat on it?
No, I'm saying it formed during the flood, under the flood water.
People on this boat with these 1,400 breeding pairs.
So you're
and a
making
year's supply
some
of water,
really
and
bad
a year's
arguments
supply
right
of
now.
food that you
Really
know
bad
they can't
arguments.
have had a year's supply of food with that kind of technology. It's not possible.
Actually,
So
they
you
could.
have to- Actually, they could.
Actually, they could.
And then those
You know what? Hey,
people are going to
they
have to have shovels to do
they
that.
addressed that one too. Do you want to talk about that?
Out the one window that God said we could have. And we know there's no part of this story that could happen. We know the meteorology doesn't allow it. Geologists doesn't allow it, but we do know where the flood legend came from.
You know, it's interesting. In a
Geologists
conversation
and
I had
archaeologists
with
have
you
confirmed
last year,
that it
you
happened,
said you
that it
could
was
be
a
wrong
flood
about
of
everything you think you
in
know.
15
And now you're making a
as
lot
they
of
said,
statements.
Centered on the city of Sherpa, the end of the Jemdut period, 2900 BC.
Do you have a problem with the separation of church and state issue with the ark?
Yes.
I got a Constitution expert right here, and we'd love to have a
Fabulous.
civil dialogue about
What's
this. What's the problem?
What is the secular purpose of the ark?
The secular purpose of the ark is science.
There's a science, secular
Have
purpose.
you gone in there to see it yet?
Why is Ken Ham saying there is no secular purpose? You want to talk?
Secular
Of course,
purpose.
yeah, tell him there's a secular purpose because
Are you
he's
kidding?
not on the news.
Do you know
and
how
said
many
there is
jobs they're creating? Over the next 10 years, they're going to create 20,000
Talk about the jobs.
And you're upset about that? Are you upset about
promote
that?
religion. You said that. That's the only reason it exists.
It is.
So is he lying or who do I believe? The guy who
Well,
said
just
that?
say that he is telling the truth. Where's the separation?
Why His objective is to glorify God, and yours is to glorify no God. You understand?
Talk about discrimination. We're not discrimination of job hire.
Yes, you only hire Christians, you exclude gays, you exclude anybody that doesn't have these fundamental.
Do you think David Silverman would hire me with the American Atheist Association?
Go ask him, he's right over
You're not qualified.
State tax funds, he would.
Well, them hiring you is up to them.
Funds, he would. If he took state tax funds,
they haven't taken one dime from the state. You continue to promote the lie. That's the problem.
I have never promoted a lie. You've made a life career out of it.
You are promoting a lie right now.
You're bouncing around a lot. Is there a separation of church and state?
So is there a church and state issue?
They're wrong, and then you'll never make that point. And then second, what is the separation of church and state? No, I can do that.
Okay, let's do the hiring practice.
What's the hiring process? That is a private religious
then it shouldn't be receiving tax funds in any way, shape, or form.
They're not receiving it.
It has some tax benefits. It shouldn't be receiving.
And let me ask you a question.
If you don't hire
we got to keep it civil, so just let's talk all the time here.
You don't hire Catholics, people who believe in science and education, then you shouldn't be receiving any tax benefits from the state of Kentucky.
Here's what's interesting. There are hundreds of state-funded museums around the world teaching the religion of evolution.
But they hire anybody that employs that's qualified to do the job, sir.
Accepted as such as a faith-based belief system holding to the idea that some essence of self, be it a soul or memories or whatever, somehow survives the death of the physical body to continue on in a supernatural form. That's every religion.
Better than believing everything came from nothing.
Is demonstrable.
No one says everything came from nothing, sir.
Science. It's an inescapable fact.
That's not evolution.
The fact that one little bitty museum versus the hundreds of museums that are paid for by tax dollars, which get you guys so upset, shows me that your religious worldview is pretty weak.
A religious worldview.
You
I just
do.
demonstrated that. He has to lie about this.
Do you believe that we came from an ape-like ancestor?
Can I prove right now that we are still apes? Yes, it can. Which proves the question you just asked.
I don't see
Apes
it.
don't have tails. We're in taxonomy.
They got a little nub there.
So you are an ape by definition. Yes, you are. An ape is any member of the.
Can we take that as an ad hominem?
I am a created being in God's right.
Do you have any evidence of that at all?
Unalienable rights.
Which
We're not
is
an
a
ape.
subset
If
of
you are an
all
ape, this sounds like Adolf Hitler at one time. He said that Jews and blacks are like animals. It does. We're creative beings because we're Americans. All of you have a right to protest because there's a First Amendment that God gave you when you were created. What does the Declaration
Where's God?
We hold these truths. We're with Ken Hovind, Eric Hovind.
Eric Hovind. So he bought Chick-fil-A to bring it here?
Yes.
And why?
Because we want to take care of you guys. We know it's what it's like to be out here. We don't necessarily support your cause, but we care about you as people. That's why we have the art encounter here. That's why we're here with this food. It's for you guys. Anyone's welcome to it.
Did Chick-fil-A donate?
Absolutely not. No.
Why Chick-fil-A?
I didn't order it, so I don't know. But we do really enjoy it. It's probably one of my favorite restaurants. So, and anyone's welcome to it. Chicken is universal like food.
Did you hear them chanting that Chick-fil-A is sexist and anti-gay?
I didn't. I would disagree with that. But
There were other protesters there too, and they are what make these events fun for me. But it's also frustrating because these people never have the slightest idea what they're talking about. They don't even know that they don't know what they don't know. In each of these confrontations, we usually have to argue about what faith is, because all of these people seem to think they have evidence for their beliefs, but they don't know what faith is because they don't know what evidence is either. None of them realize that what they're calling evidence are always either empty philosophical sophistry or logical fallacies, most commonly question begging and arguments from ignorance, incredulity, and false authority.
I know that you've assumed that a thing exists, therefore God, but how does the thing existing imply that a God did it?
Then explain to me all the DNA that you know about who made it.
Okay,
you said someone made DNA.
I made a video explaining this actually.
Okay, well, I don't have time to do DNA.
I understand you don't have time, but I did do it. I did answer the question.
That means you can, in simple form, answer me right here. How did all this mass DNA, you guys say amoebas and you say fish, and
Okay, we already had DNA before there was an agency.
Okay.
DNA is self-replicated by RNA, and RNA replicates itself.
And then how did all that change to be the next species? The next species. Okay. All right. How did DNA? I was on subject DNA. Okay. How did that change from one to the next?
Because it makes copying errors.
Copying errors? I'm glad I'm not a bunch of copy errors. I'm glad for your sake you're not a bunch of copy errors.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. According to PubMed, the average human, right from the very beginning, we already have an average of 120 mutations. Just to start, and then we gather more mutations every age.
But just one single DNA is a whole lot more than something little pieces.
Those are mutations. 120 mutations. That's just at the very beginning. That's what we start with.
There's a whole lot bigger gap that all these species, you see all that has DNA, and it wasn't scientists sitting in some fancy.
Hey people, can I get some attention? Yeah. The creationists of pop.
Are you in we know how DNA
okay, never mind.
replicates itself. We know how evolution happens. None of that implies a magic invisible beast.
How many animals and species, viruses, bacteria, algae, how many different species of all of these exist? And who made it? How'd they get here?
There's no who. And they procreate, and they do subtle changes, and it creates a great deal of
where are the mistakes by chance between one and the next?
The 128 mutations per human zygote. These are 128 mistakes per zygote. So there was no proof. So how do you get, in order to have proof, you need to first have a fact that indicates a conclusion.
Oh, I did.
Can you show me a fact?
Oh, I did.
Show me a fact.
I had a big one that you can't even get anywhere
What's
near.
that?
All of the species on this world. Let's say there's 10,000 species of viruses, bacteria. Okay, well, let's
and that is only 1% of the species that have ever lived.
Now, who made those DNA?
That's only 1%.
From each one?
That's only 1% of the species that have ever lived. So most of the species, by far, that have ever lived are extinct now. You understand that? I mean, we're talking about thousands of species of giraffes and dinosaurs and thousands of them.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, of different species, of different genus.
Yeah,
right?
after the flood, everything really
There was no flood. We know that for certain. There was absolutely no flood. We can prove there was no flood. This never happened. We know that for certain, and there's a whole bunch of different ways we can prove it.
What do you think that is on Mount Ararat? When the scripture says it was
a rock formation, and they proved that. They proved that. Wyatt was Wyatt, it's not made out of wood. It's a rock formation, and Wyatt was proved to be a liar. It was a falsification, and the Christian community proved that he was lying. The Christian community. Stephen Meyer of the Discovery Institute said, "Don't listen to Wyatt. He didn't find it in dark."
I'm not real up on the
okay.
where
There
it
was
is
no
and what it
there
looks
was
like,
no world
the
flood.
ruins that are
We
there.
know that. We can't prove it. Here's one of the proofs for it: finding human remains in South America and doing genetic tests.
Wait a minute, you're a whole new subject. I had you checkmated on DNA. I had you checking on DNA.
Right.
I had you checking.
You
said
don't
there's
have a
million
fact that
species.
indicates your conclusion.
You said you have a million. You think there's a million species out there. And I said, who made the DNA? I checkmated.
I just told
You're
you
checkmated.
the DNA is made by RNA, and RNA is self-replicating. There was no who. I answered your question.
No.
I'm sorry.
You're totally missing my question.
And then somebody takes your
Okay,
Is it the same thing as calling the game and then your cue ball goes in after the game?
You're guessing there's a million species.
I'm not
What's your
guessing.
number?
We can prove that.
Okay, all right, I'll take that as given. I'm all right with that. No, who made the DNA for each of those?
The DNA is made by RNA, and RNA replicates itself.
They're chemicals. They don't need to be.
There's no who. I answered the question. If you ask the question again, I'm
DNA
going to
is
give
a
you the
lot
same.
more. You're
Yes.
oversimplifying
I
DNA.
am simplifying
You are
it a great deal,
super.
but that's still the correct answer, and I can prove it.
Okay,
So,
good. Where's your
where
science
is-
lab? I'll join you, and I'll watch. I'll bring a camera.
Where?
How can you prove it? I want to see it.
I just
Because
told
I don't
you
think
said
you
you
can.
didn't have time.
Or
I said I
you-
made a video explaining it. I'd be happy to refer
No,
you to that.
explain this talk. Do it.
That's what
Do
a video
it.
is.
Film it.
You want me
do some DNA, make some DNA, and then put it online. And make
When
some
it
DNA.
okay, if other people have already done it, and I refer you to the studies where they do it.
That has done it?
Yes.
And where is the millions?
Just do some DNA.
Show me the millions
that were made from the beginning.
Did I tell you that somebody made millions of species, or did I tell you that somebody
Yes,
made
I know.
DNA?
I know him. He died for my sins.
No,
I know
Craig
who you're
Venter's
talking
still
about.
alive.
Yes, he is alive.
And Jesus never existed.
Oh,
but that's a separate point.
All right, I'm hearing
But
you.
we can prove there was no flood, and I was about to give you the reason why.
Well, no, you're jumping. I really have you checkmated on DNA.
Except you don't.
Checkmated. A
How?
million
Okay.
species.
Millions
Where
of
did
species.
they come from?
They evolved, and they evolved because the DNA began from being replicated by RNA, which replicates itself.
Now, let's back up a step. Tell me how complicated DNA is from species to species. I have you checkmated. How? DNA from one species to the next is extremely complicated.
DNA is extremely complicated, Frank.
The next thing on my list, or one of the things on the list, is the gift of life.
How is DNA being complicated an indication of God?
God made the DNA, he made those
You're
things.
making an assumption. You're making an assumption that is not supported by evidence.
Where did God come
You're
from?
making an assumption that is not supported by evidence. Why have you assumed? Why have you assumed that God A exists and B that He created DNA?
Okay, then I just asked you an alternative theory. What made the millions of DNA?
I just told you that, and I
You
repeated
didn't.
it.
You never got anywhere close to it.
Once again, I tell you again, the millions of species evolved through errors, mutations in the copy of their DNA, and the DNA began by RNA, and RNA began replicating itself.
We're saying by
That's the
chance,
answer.
right? Well, we're saying by chance. That
It's
these-
also deterministic, so it doesn't matter if it's by chance.
There's another species.
There's
another evolved perfectly.
They evolved the same way languages evolved. You know how Latin started out and then it became Spanish and French and Italian and Romanian? These are a type of evolution. You understand how that works?
Well,
there's no proof.
The languages do change.
Yes, in exactly the same way that organisms change over time at a population level, not individuals, not poof.
After the flood, they
explain to me your checkmate because I'm still
Oh, yeah.
waiting for.
Oh, please.
Wait,
I
I'm
think you've
still
been-
waiting for
Yes.
why you've made the assumption that there's a magic invisible man
I'm working
and
with
how
them.
he magicked anything
Sure,
up.
let's have fun with this.
Okay.
A million species. Where's the DNA? Who made it?
Again, I answered the same question again. Nobody made it. RNA made the DNA, and RNA
By chance.
replicates itself.
But you're implying by chance.
I don't.
So
it doesn't
where
matter
are
if
all
it's by
the
chance.
misses?
Are you
Well,
saying?
it-
When you say by
it's
chance,
amazing
when you
difference.
say by chance, do you mean that it wasn't done deliberately?
I'm-
Is that what you mean by chance?
Yes, that's what
Okay,
you're-
yes,
I-
it's clearly not done deliberately.
Okay, that's a big error in your calculation.
It's a provable statement.
You're making DNA so simple,
But it's
you
not
just-
simple. It's extremely complex.
Only a very brilliant person can make the DNA.
Wrong.
that
It's an emergent property.
You are simply
Demonstrate
where's all
it's
the
an
steps?
emergent property.
Where's all the in-between steps? Lots by chance.
Between step,
You said chance.
I've got them all. Which
Okay.
which intermediate step do you need?
All right. Now, what do you think started in the
Which intermediate step do you need? I have them all.
Oh, please, that's two. All right, let's go. You guys believe monkeys turn into humans after a lot
Actually,
of...
you're still a monkey right now, and we can prove that.
Well, no, because you can't.
You can actually
can't
prove that you
reproduce
are
with a
a
monkey.
monkey. Yes, you are a member of the infraorder Catarrhinae. You are an old world monkey.
Okay, but you can't
Yes.
mix the DNA. So
I'm not
there's a
mixing
difference between
DNA.
the DNA.
I'm not mixing DNA. There are many species of monkey. You are one.
Okay, which one can a human reproduce with?
Humans. That's the species of monkey that humans are. So that's the which species of monkey can a howler monkey breed with? A howler monkey. There are many different kinds of monkeys, including people. So you are a monkey. So yes, we
They're
came
laughing.
from
They're
monkeys,
enjoying
and
you
we
saying
can
that.
prove that, not just for the fact that we are monkeys, but for many other beings too. More specifically, if you want to discuss only, yeah, I can prove that. I can prove that. I can prove that, and it's not a theory. Okay. So a subset of monkeys is the old world monkeys. And old world monkeys have a few more characteristics to add to the previous set, including downward pointing nostrils. Whereas the New World monkeys have splayed nostrils going up the side. No, I'm talking about hundreds of species, because Old World monkeys comprises hundreds of species, and we are one. Now, another subset of Old World monkeys.
the human race is one. I agree with that.
Okay, and that we are within the subclass of. I can prove the point. So it's any member of the infraorder Catarrhinae, which is the Old World monkeys. You describe all the characteristics, you describe people. To further, no, that's not correct. How do you think? Give me your protest. Give me your objection. How is it incorrect?
Well, for one thing, that humans are separate from animals.
No, they're not. Not in any sense.
If I may, humans are separate from animals because
they're not.
they do think.
No. So
at
we're
a
smarter
higher
than
level.
other animals.
No,
We're smarter
no,
than other
we
animals.
also have a conscience. You have the law written in your
Yeah, and other
Do you know
animals
it's
have a
wrong to lie?
conscience as
Do you know
well.
it's wrong to steal? Do you know it's wrong to
Yeah,
covet?
and
Do you
other
know it's
animals
wrong
have a
to
conscience
immorality
as
of
well.
lust?
But
Because
having
that
a conscience, even if other animals didn't have a conscience, that would just mean that we are animals with a conscience.
You could say it that way, but that's
I
not.
have to say it that way because I want to say things that are true, that I can show to
You're
be
working
true.
with your theory, but it's
I'm not working with a theory. I'm working with things I can prove to be true. To you, to your satisfaction, I can prove the things that I'm saying are
You didn't
correct.
explain conscience. But go ahead.
I didn't say explain what?
You didn't explain conscience.
I did say that other animals have it too.
Can you give me an example?
Of an animal that has a conscience. Have you ever had a dog?
Okay. Learning. It's a good question, but that's not what I'm talking about.
You said animals don't have conscience, though. I mean, that's a fair question,
If I
right?
could actually,
Do we have to ask for another definition? What is conscience?
Okay, conscience is not learning what is accepted in a social circle. Baboons, if you watch them, there's a pecking order. There's an alpha and beta, you already know. So they learn what is accepted at their level. Right. Well, that's different. The dog can do that. It'll learn what pleases you, what doesn't please you. That's not conscience.
And they understand when
That's
they've
what
done
makes
something
you
wrong.
happy or
If
makes
you
you
had a
angry.
dog, you'd know that.
Well, yes, I have that.
So the dogs have conscience as well.
Not
So it doesn't matter.
No, you misunderstood. No.
Okay, so the dog doesn't know when it's done something wrong?
Okay. Wrong or
My dog does. I don't know about your dog.
uncomfortable. See, like and dislike, so you talk about conscience is something completely separate.
Okay.
Conscience is a knowledge of God said this. He said
There is no knowledge. Nobody has knowledge of the magic imaginary friend saying dick. Nobody has knowledge of that. God does not exist. God is imaginary. He wrote nothing. Ignorant, bigoted savages pretending to speak for God wrote a whole bunch of fables.
I partially agree with you there. Okay. We have a lot of corrupt religion.
So, getting back to my point. Getting back to the guy running over there. Getting back to my point. If you can describe a suborder or a subgroup of Ultramontes, Hominoidea, apes. This includes lesser apes and great apes. We are also in that category. We have less fur than the general monkey population, but we have the same amount of follicles as all of the other apes and so forth. There's maybe 50 fossil species of apes that are not included in the hominid ape or the humanoid family line. So, if you further define it to describe the traits characteristic of great apes, you're pretty precise on us. Again, you can't describe them without describing us. They have the exact same dentition that we do.
Different DNA, though.
No.
Appearance isn't everything.
No.
The DNA is very different.
But the difference is absolutely almost identical.
Okay, let me say it this way. There are significant differences between the ape and human.
No, there are not,
There's
and
a
I can
different
prove
class.
that. And you cannot. And I've been on this argument a billion times. Believe me, you can't prove this. I can. So, depending on how you measure it, because there's two different ways of measuring it. It just depends on what you qualify.
Wait, you're talking about carbon dating?
No, I'm talking about genetics.
Okay, so I'm just on genetics. Okay.
Depending on which portion you count on what way, it's 96 to 98%. Now, if you're using the one that gives you the 98 point something percent, then baboons, as you mentioned before, are 95%. To give you some idea of the similarity. So even they are close to identical to us. But the other chimpanzees and such, virtually identical.
Okay.
So, further defining that, so now I think we're pretty much done. So when people describe whether you came from apes, you are still an ape.
I still disagree with you.
I know. You're welcome to be wrong, but I can prove it. I can really honestly prove that.
Well, you haven't yet.
I have, actually. You just haven't understood the information.
No, you're quoting what you're saying in science reports. I've not seen yet. So,
okay, I just gave it to you. You now know what to look up.
I can look it up, but I've already studied a lot of this. And
I don't think you have. Okay, but I'll help you out here. Locolobo.org. That's LOCOLOBO. Locolobo. It's a website I created. There's a subsite on that called the Systematic Classification of Life Forms, and it will help you go down through the evolutionary steps. What do you mean? What's it based on?
Well, everybody has a worldview. That's why they base.
It's not a base. It's not a worldview.
Yes, you have a.
No, it's not a worldview.
Yes, you do.
No, it's not a worldview. If I can demonstrate that it's a fact, that's a fact. It doesn't matter what my view of it is.
Let me ask you this. You're saying you don't have a worldview. Let me ask you this. Is lying wrong?
Yes.
Why?
Why?
You just admitted there's a right and wrong by saying yes.
Yes.
It is wrong.
How's that
Why
related?
is it wrong?
How's that related to the facts that I was describing before?
Because
it means that the facts are not part of a worldview, but my belief about lies is.
Ah, but wait. You can't separate.
Why not?
Evolution says there is no right and wrong.
No. Evolution does not say that. Evolution says that we evolved as a social species. That means that we have a natural, innate tendency to.
But likes and dislikes are not.
It has nothing to do with likes and dislikes. Would you let me finish the sentence? We have a natural empathy for our family, friends, and fellows. We are a social animal. So, quite the opposite of saying there is no right and wrong. Evolution says there is a right and wrong. This is what benefits society. The more nurturing we are to each other. Religion very often goes completely against that. Religion makes us go against our nature.
I would disagree with that.
I know, but I can prove that too.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But let's stick on this real quick. Why is lying wrong?
Because it's a form of violence.
You'd be correct there. But is it just wrong because it's deceiving a neighbor, or is it taking advantage of them? You're saying? Explain.
It's misleading someone. If somebody is looking to you for information, you're betraying their trust.
Correct.
And if they don't have accurate information, they can't make an accurate judgment.
Correct.
Which is why I stand against religion.
Okay.
Because it is dishonest to assert as fact that which is not evidently true. Yet that's what all religions do. That is all they do.
May I ask you another question? Jesus explained that lying is wrong. So, may I ask if you're also charging him with being dishonest like the other pagans that we see pretending to be pastors?
I don't charge him with anything. He never existed.
Okay, so 39 non-biblical sources that prove that Jesus existed are lies?
Nobody has ever proved that
Jesus. 39. You need,
I know.
You got some
just
homework.
said.
You need to go look this up.
Okay, I've already interviewed Frank Zuber, Robert Price, Dia Murdoch, David Fitzgerald, Richard Carrier. I've interviewed everybody in the mythicist movement. Okay, nobody has presented evidence that Jesus existed. Not just that nobody has proved it.
Roman and Greek
There
records don't count.
there are Roman and Greek records, and there are two that are interpolations or forgeries.
You need to do some more research.
In music, no, I don't believe I can do any more research on this. I'm kind of done. Okay, I think you need to get started to catch up to me, and then we'll continue the conversation.
You need to. There are 39 different non-biblical resources.
Give me evidence that Jesus existed.
You have to go up and research yourself.
I already did. I know there isn't any.
No, you looked at two recent ones. I'm talking about records, historical records.
Look me up, and I'll just make this challenge so everybody can hear it. Look me up and present to me evidence that Jesus ever existed. Because I've already talked to a whole fuckload of people about this. Nobody.
There are a lot of living people that present themselves as Christian leaders that are not. So you have to be aware.
I don't just talk to Christian leaders because I like honest people too. So I will talk to sincere people.
Some Christians are honest.
Some of them, but they are misled. So there is no evidence that Jesus ever existed. There actually is evidence that he didn't. And Josephus is one of them.
Josephus?
Yeah.
Okay.
He actually spoke about 3 different Jesuses, and I think some people get them confused.
Well, if you're talking about the modern representation of Jesus, yeah, that's a lie. But the Jesus of the Bible is proven by historical evidence.
No, there is 0 evidence to support the existence of Jesus. I'm offering to prove it. Look me up.
Fair enough.
Public statement.
Yeah,
okay.
What's your name?
They're Aaron Ra. A-R-O-N-R-A. I speak. You're an H.
All right.
And there is no Jesus.
The next day, Helton and I toured this farcical ark alongside the infamous Ken Ham and his more famous rival, Bill Nye the Science Guy. All the while, Ken told Bill that you don't know, you weren't there, you can't be sure. Because faith is a matter of make-believe, the only way they can keep pretending in an imaginary reality is if they can convince themselves that we don't really know what we know about reality as it is. When we arrived at the parking lot for the Ark encounter, we had to run through a torrential downpour, which was as real an experience as this Ark could have. And we were then told to come inside the ticket area and wait for the second of 2 tornado warnings that week. The storm seemed promising at first, but unfortunately no tornado ever materialized, because that's the one thing the Ark encounter wasn't prepared for, and that would have been too funny. And I have to tell you that once I got inside the Ark, I was not impressed. Think about it. Does this look like the interior of a boat that could have been built with the technical skill that was available 5,000 years ago?
Okay, here's the door to the Ark, and you can see the air conditioning system. Even with the air conditioning system and the fact that there's not that many people in here, it's still really hot. Looks like they devoted most of the space to stairways. And then, of course, we have the exit doors to the adjoining building. We are to believe that in 2900 BCE, they had steel rivets and braces. And look at our dromaeosaurs. Get a good look at there. Where are the feathers? Now, this is good. They argue very often against horse evolution, for example, right? But now they want to say that they only had 1,400 species and that they somehow replenished everything in the world. So where do we get horses from? Well, now they admit transitional species. Take a look at those feet. You have only 3 toes on this animal because 2 of them have now been reduced. In the subsequent species, the 2 toes that you see on the sides will be raised off the ground, vestigial, don't even touch the ground anymore. So they apparently are admitting to evolution. They're completely vestigial.
Yeah, I mean, that's
and then in the later one,
variation.
and in the later one, but they're different species.
Right, I mean, species come from a kind.
There's no such thing as a kind.
Well,
There really, no,
I mean,
I made a video to prove it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there really is honestly no such thing as a kind.
I'm
You
just
can't
telling
name
you our
me 2.
perspective.
Okay, from your perspective,
Right.
you cannot name 2 created kinds. It can't be done. So anyway, what we got here is an entire line.
Our guide through this fantasy cruise was Tony Ramsek, one of the Ark Encounter employees. And of course, you have to sign a waiver that you attest that you hold all the extreme religious beliefs that Ken Ham does in order to work there. So we can be sure that he is a young Earth creationist who denies evolution and deep time and all of that. Pretty quickly, I found myself having to explain to him why so many of the stuffed animals on board weren't created kinds that he thought they were, and why they were transitional species.
I don't see where there's a difference.
Oh, right.
How could there be a difference?
You don't see the difference between microevolution and macroevolution?
I know exactly what the difference is. Microevolution is variation within species, like within different breeds of dogs, where you get different traits that show up within a single interbreeding group. Speciation, however, crosses into macroevolution. Macroevolution is change at the species level and beyond. The species is the only taxonomic group that actually has a definition. So every new genus or order or whatever, right, they are. All of those classifications beyond species are just signposts so that we can see their family, their familial relationships. These things, by the way, the other renderings are perfect. This is missing something. Do you know what it is? Every dromaeosaurian has feathers. They have half wings, and they use those. The wings are useless for anything except brooding a larger clutch of eggs. So there's a strong selective. Even T-Rex, all of them, because we found the quill marks in the arms that are the same quill marks that we have in birds for feather anchoring points. These you find in velociraptors. We've also found them sitting on one of them. There was an oviraptor that was buried while it was sitting on its nest. So it's sitting on an entire clutch of eggs, and it has its arms wrapped around the eggs. You can't warm eggs with your arms unless you're a feather. But then they also found in China, they found the actual feathers. And they've even got one. It's a complete dinosaur arm with
documented
yes.
like a science
magazine. Yes. And they even have an amber cast of an actual arm. It's a very small, it's convenient a baby dinosaur, but it actually has the feathers and it's encased with an amber cast. So we now have a couple dozen feathered dinosaurs where we actually see the feathers themselves. Even Triceratops. They've got Triceratops kid impression that they found in Houston. And every foot to 18 inches or so, there's a quill hole like this, like you would expect with a feather thing. So what they think, because it's on a different line than the primarily feathered dinosaurs, is that it didn't have the plume, it only had the rings. Which means that the Triceratops would have looked like a hedgehog or a porcupine. It didn't just have the horns on the front, it had spikes all over it. Anyway, that's a different type of feather. These guys were fully plumed.
So tell me, what do you think about this whole Ark encounter?
Not remotely possible. We know the flood never happened. We can prove many different ways, various aspects of how the flood never happened. Could never have happened on a global scale. We know what did happen. We know when and where it happened. Wow. And how the story came from.
Hi, I'm Aaron Ross, Texas State Director for Atheist Experience. Yes. Now see, my standards are actually higher than this. If you're going to lower the bar this much, my job's already done. At the close of our tour, Remzik brought us into an office for sandwiches. He spoke for maybe a whole minute about his vacuous beliefs in Jesus saving him from his sin, an invisible friend saving him from something that was never there to begin with. So I jumped in to say how utterly empty that notion was, that the only value information can have is how accurate you can show it to be, and if you can't show that it is accurate at all, then it has no value at all. So I can't ignore evidence the way he can. I mean, I have to consider it, and I have to have that if I'm going to believe anything. I have to have sufficient reason to convince me. I can't simply pretend what is not evidently true. And that's when he, too, said that he had evidence for his beliefs. Then I had to turn the camera back on. Now, the way Eric Hovind tells it, Remzik shared the gospel with us for a couple of hours, but that's just another of his lies. Let's look at what really happened.
Okay. It's unreasonable.
Right. So I'm saying that in the entirety of the history of the world, no one ever has presented any evidence indicative of God. He says it's an absolute statement, that there are many exceptions. I challenge you at this time, produce for me one.
What about me?
What about you? You have evidence.
Evidence of what?
Evidence of God, what I just said.
I don't have evidence of God. How about that this creation even exists? It's even here today.
Okay, so it's an assumed conclusion. You realize it's a logical fallacy, right?
No.
It's a circular argument running back to the
I mean,
a thing exists, therefore God. Why is God? A thing exists, therefore it exists.
Creation exists.
Okay, so you assume that it's creation. What if you call it reality? Do you need a realtor for reality?
You need someone to create that reality.
Why?
An intelligence.
Why?
That's
we
the way
have
it
emergent
works.
properties that create themselves. RNA creates itself, and then subsequently creates DNA. We don't need an intelligence. So we have a thing that exists. You assume there's a God. What is the evidence? What is the evidence that there is a God?
That we have matter. Where
Well,
did
we
matter
don't
come
need
from?
a God to have matter.
How did we get matter then? How did matter come into existence?
Matter kind of always existed.
Okay, right.
Kind
so
of.
you believe in eternal matter.
At the same time as the Big Bang.
Out of that
At the
eternal
same time as
matter
the Big Bang.
came all of this life form.
This is going to be too
See
far.
what I'm saying? Whereas I believe in eternal life that created
Right, which is not
lower
possible.
life forms, right?
You're believing what you believe in is a top-down.
Biogenesis, the law of biogenesis, Louis Pasteur.
Louis
Life
Pasteur, you know,
only
was-
comes from life.
you know,
We've
Louis Pasteur was
we've
actually
never seen
just
life
proving
come
it's
from this
supernatural.
life, right?
Right,
We've
we
never
do know
seen
how it
life
happens.
comes from non-life. We have not observed that, right?
But we now know how it
we do
happens.
see life coming from life. So
But we
that
know-
is the scientific method.
We know that life comes from life, and we know that
Right.
there's ways science
So I
ways in
believe in
which you
eternal
begin
life.
without
I
any
believe in
creation.
eternal life.
So we know how
And from that eternal life comes lower life forms. You believe in eternal life.
Can we round back?
You see what I'm saying?
Okay,
So
what
what
you're
you're
telling me-
saying is
what you're telling me
what
is-
your belief is goes against the observable scientific method.
No, nothing I believe is distorted
I
from the
just showed
scientific
you.
method. You said that because you don't know, argument from ignorance, you don't know how this thing happens,
I didn't say
therefore
that.
God did it, but I
No,
do know how
I
this
didn't
thing
say that.
happens, and I can show you.
I just showed it to you, but
But you didn't show me. You said you were going to present evidence. Your evidence is,
did.
I assume the conclusion because I assume the conclusion because I don't know any better.
I just showed it to
That
you.
is not, no, you didn't. You assume that because life
I'm not
creates
gonna
life, that
say
you
it
don't know
again,
how life
because
began.
you're
If I
being
say,
argumentative
if
and
I
I
say,
mean,
because you're deflecting from, you said you had evidence of God. No, you do not.
You put words in my
I
mouth. You said that.
did he say on this recording that he had evidence of God?
Yeah, and I just showed you that.
You said you didn't. What you gave me was a fallacious argument, a circular argument routing back to the assumed conclusion. Nothing exists, therefore God.
No,
Why do
I
you
didn't say
assume
that.
that therefore God?
I didn't say that.
You said
that's
matter.
what
You said
you
matter
said.
exists. You
You
need a
said
God
that I
to create
said
matter. It's recorded. You said it.
I said what did I say?
You said that matter exists. You need an intelligence to create matter. No, you don't. It's an emergent property.
You said that matter is eternal.
Because if time begins with the Big Bang, then there's a point at which time stretches out. It stretches gravity. So when you get to the point of the Big Bang, 1 second equals infinity, infinity equals 0. That means it's both infinite and has a beginning.
Right. So you're saying that matter is eternal, And yet, from that eternal matter came all this life form, which goes against the
Because
law of
emergence,
biogenesis.
but it has nothing to do with the law of biogenesis, which, by the way, you don't understand what Louis Pasteur did either. He was disproving a supernatural belief. And he was using methodological naturalism to do that.
Yeah, he used the scientific method to show that spontaneous, the scientific method.
You know what spontaneous generation was?
That's what I'm trying to show you, right?
It was the belief that
That's what I'm trying to show you, that Louis Pasteur.
Right. It has nothing to do. You understand, spontaneous generation and
that's
are not related.
Look, you see,
No. You're changing the subject. I asked you for evidence. I'm asking for a demonstration of evidence. Okay. Louis Pasteur, his spontaneous generation is the belief that supernaturally all things that ever lived have life inherent in them. So poop and dead bodies and decomposing organic matter will all ooze life force, and that these things will turn into something else. This is a supernatural belief. We just proved that. This is not.
Go ahead.
All right. So I asked for evidence of God. Evidence of God. And what I mean by that is anything that qualifies as evidence. So what evidence is?
By the way,
is a fact.
My non-response is not an acquiescing that you are right. I'm trying to be polite here. Okay. Let me have the last word. I don't know how long it's going to go.
You said you had evidence. I'm going to tell you what evidence is. Let's see what you got.
How long are you going to go?
I'm just going to. And that depends on how many times you interrupt me.
All right.
What evidence would be is a fact that's objectively verifiable, right? Which is positively indicative of or exclusively concordant with the God hypothesis over any other. Now I've got that for evolution. I've got tons of it for evolution. But I'm saying nobody, never, ever in the history of the world has any for God.
All right. Thank you for that.
So as you can see, this is why I do what I do. Because this is a lot for us to be up against.
An enemy has been slain.
The world is real. We both see this guy, so we touch him. So we're going to take that as a kind of group given and observe that. From that, we're going to get lots of beliefs. We start putting those beliefs together. Quine's example was a spider web, into a web of belief. Many of those, the first ones we do, have to do with direct observations. They're kind of subjective, they're kind of objective, but direct observations. Some of them later on will be philosophical beliefs that tie the two together. For example, the assumption by everyone who does science and who does philosophy that the universe is regular. Whether there's a God or not, theists assume that God is regular. That's how science was able to be born out of religion. People like William of Ockham had good reason to think that you shouldn't multiply entities needlessly, because God would be regular, he would design a strategy. Those beliefs, hang on, so some are very externally constrained, the things we choose to accept as externally verified. Then there are second kinds of sub-beliefs that are themselves philosophical to help all the beliefs cohere. Now, what we would want to do is do this. Do our observations make sense of the world as we seem to be observing it? That's where science can help us. Second, do the philosophical beliefs that we picked up cohere and make all those beliefs work together without cheating, without being irrational, without, just saying something because I want to believe it? That web of belief is sadly never going to be certainly true, because However we develop it, to give you the big thing, this is where Shermer conceded that this is the case, and where theism can't be called irrational and just fideism. To pick between idealism as a general belief and materialism as a general belief, or dualism as a general belief, will never have anything to do with science. It will have to do with philosophical preferences based on, for example, I could do the same science as...
That's why I strike it as being irrelevant.
No, it isn't irrelevant in this way. Daniel Dennett, to hold to materialism, it's not an attack on Dennett, Dennett himself says this, has to assume in the end that mind doesn't exist. That he, Daniel Dennett, doesn't exist. It's what he calls the Cartesian theater, where, our brains trick us into believing we exist. There are just a series of brain states. Now, that's a high cost. The advantage to dualism/theism would be, I can do science. In fact, I do the exact same science as Dennett, but I don't have to assume, because I'm not a materialist, let's say I'm an idealist, I'm in fact not, but the simplest way to go is idealism. I can assume that Daniel Dennett exists. Now, I don't care how much science we talk about, science is never going to be able to choose between those two worlds. And here's the work one does. In one world, Daniel Dennett doesn't exist. He's a series of brain states. In another world, those same series of brain states exist, but Daniel Dennett exists. Now, that's a philosophical preference, and philosophers could bet back and forth, but science isn't going to determine. Now I'm done, now you can attack the view, but that's the view. The view isn't that we should just leap out there and believe anything, or that everything's subjective.
Okay. So, what I often do when I'm getting into this with this is I try to get to the reality of the world by definition, because I hate that every time I try to bring evidence, it immediately turns into how do we know anything. So suddenly we can't know that we even exist. So in this particular debate I had about a year ago, I told the guy at the beginning, I said, your position is certainly right as if reality is wrong. And very quickly, usually at the beginning of the debate, you will tell me that in some way the reality is wrong or might be wrong. And it was minutes later, when I start presenting evidence that he can't refute, the only way he can deal with that evidence is by telling me that I can't even prove that I in fact existed 2 weeks ago, because I might be a brain in a vat and all my memories might be false. And I said, thank you for telling me that reality might not be real. Exactly as I predicted you would do.
Okay.
Now, if I may add something else. If I'm listening to your presentation and I think that something that you just said contradicts something that you previously said, and that's the only thing that I remember about it. What was the thing that he said that contradicted the other thing? So I say, well, of course, you wouldn't have seen it that way. You wouldn't have seen it as a contradiction of the other thing that you said. That's a fair statement, and not remotely an insult.
Okay, go ahead. What is it?
I don't remember the example, but yeah, it had something to do with we can't give the details of a thing if we can't verify that the thing exists. Well, that's what Christianity is. It's giving details about something.
I think that you don't understand that if you're talking to a philosopher, whether they're a theist or not, the problem with your arguments is that your terms are so loose. You're using terms in such a loose, imprecise way that it isn't that I want to deny reality. It is that by the time I nail down what you're saying, I'm not denying reality anymore. You just use language in a very sort of vague way.
I do exactly the opposite. I use very precise definitions.
Excellent.
Okay, so an example I was talking about with somebody else, I was looking around, he's not here anymore, but he says that something about being just animals, because it's the evolutionary view that we're just animals. And I said, well, you realize that whether God exists or not, either way, you're still an animal. I don't believe in an animal, he says. Okay. You're an animal is any multicellular eukaryote
from
with an internal
Aristotle
digestive
forward,
tract,
almost
right?
all Christians at almost all places, at almost all times, have believed that humans are animals in an interesting and important sense of the term. So I agree with you.
So but it's not a point of whether you agree with me.
Right.
The point is the person I'm talking to admits that he's a multicellular eukaryote with an internal digestive tract, but says he doesn't believe he's an animal. This is a fact. Right. And it's objectively verifiable, but he's denying it because he doesn't want to believe it.
In fact, what you've described isn't a fact, even on your view of facts.
It's
a definition. No, what you've done is define the English term animal as it's used in science using a set of criteria
if we accept that set of criteria, then you're right, he should have agreed that he was an animal. But notice, you're not, you're dealing with the definition of a word, you're not dealing with facts. So for example, last night,
How am I not dealing with facts? Is it a fact that we are all multicellular?
good.
Is it a fact that we've matched the definition?
Yes.
Okay.
No, listen to what you're saying, because in fact, this is a good point. It is a fact that we're multicellular. It is a choice within the English language to use the term animal to describe something that has the following factual characteristics. So it is an accident of language that we use the term animal, or even lump certain characteristics together to use the phrase animal. Not everybody divides taxonomy out the same way, recall. So the definition, once we accept your definition of animal, and we should, that's the way people use the term animal in science and not being clever, agreeing with a definition, however, is different than agreeing with a fact. If I disagreed we were multicellular, I'd be disagreeing with a fact, as you're using facts.
Denying animals is the same as denying eukaryotes. The eukaryote only implies that all your cells have a nucleus, including your
So
blood cells at one
I must
stage.
be being very unclear. So let me try it this way. Let's invent the invented word gavagai. And we're going to say the word gavagai means attached rabbit parts.
I got a better example for you. Right? I was born in mid-October. There are people that call me Libra. I meet the definition of Libra. Can I decide that I'm not a Libra because I don't want to be?
Right.
I don't. This is why I said rules apply to me that do not apply to this.
No.
Because I can't just say that if the definition defines me, or if it describes me, it defines me. Right?
But notice that notice contradicting a definition is different than contradicting a fact. That's all. I'm making one simple point. You asked me, you said, I want to be very clear and precise in my language. So I'm trying to be very clear and precise in my language. What the person disagreed with, they shouldn't have disagreed, was not with facts, but with your definition.
Okay, so how do I verify that I'm using the correct definition?
If you had started, and you did, I think that they were wrong to do what they did, by saying, I'm going to define animal with this set of facts. Do you agree that you have all those factual characteristics? And they said yes. And they had already accepted your, or the community's, agreed to prior definition. Then they should have logically accepted that they were an animal.
Thank you.
But
because he did.
But notice.
Chinese, English is a second language.
It's his second language,
Anyway,
right?
But just.
But notice that if we got into a discussion of what was an animal, we're going to actually end up discussing which bundle of facts to put in the definition of animal. And so the disagreement might not be about facts, but classification systems, which scientists do all the time, right? So I have good friends who are biologists. I'm not one. I don't, do biology for a living. And they go back and forth on what kinds of classification systems would be best for understanding the natural world, how to subdivide the natural world. Is it useful to talk about animals as opposed to non-animals? And so they argue about that. Notice when they argue about that, they're arguing about definitions, which is an important thing to argue about. That's what we're talking about now, not about facts.
I'm the director of the Phylogeny Explorer project.
Excellent.
It's a taxonomic website, essentially.
Right.
The entire tree of life rendered
right
as a navigable online encyclopedia.
I've been there.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, I knew that from reading your bio on phylogeny. I should have said it that way. So great, that's a good thing. But notice when you do that, you're dealing with definition sets. And if somebody came to you and said, wow, I prefer, a different, I prefer to look at the tree of life differently. I'm not even talking about disputing Darwinism and things. We'd like to run the cladograms differently. We'd like to say this is related to that. We'd like to redefine things. You wouldn't be having an argument about facts. You'd be having an important argument about how to define those facts. And why is that important? Because those definitions give us a tree of life, or they give us relationships that might help us see other relationships. Now, what does that have to do with what we're discussing? My suggestion to you is this. A lot of discussions, at least from what I'm hearing, you're using words in ways that philosophers would not use them. So it's creating confusion in your listeners, because they'll say, no, I don't think that's a fact.
So how do you define a fact?
I would say,
because again, I'm being as precise as I possibly can. I go to every definitive source I can. I see where they hold consensus, and I summarize what they're all saying.
Let me ask you a question. When it comes to deciding definitions of terms like fact, argument, logic, terms, what career field deals with those?
I don't know the name.
It's philosophy of language. So what we would do, and what you should do, is do this on the fly, because I give you a bad one, and then my grad professors would yell at me. Go to a decent philosophy of language book, get a term for term, find out what terms mean, find out what facts mean to those people. It's not going to stop you from doing science. It is going to produce a kind of linguistic clarity that will help you win an argument where you've actually won an argument with what the person believes, instead of winning an argument by winning it through confusion.
Do you use a different definition of fact than
Yeah, I do.
What is your definition of fact?
It is a mind-independent reality that may or may not be knowable by me.
Okay, I don't see that as being significantly different than what I'm talking about.
It will turn out to be.
Okay, there's a chevron shape on the moon Miranda, one of the moons of Neptune, I believe it is. And it wasn't observed until 20 years ago.
Right.
But clearly this thing existed out in space, a result of some undescribed event, before we knew about it.
Yeah, as far as we know.
So we'll both call that a fact.
Sure.
Yeah, that's
in the
a
sense
point
I'm
of data.
using.
That's a point of data that we can also objectively verify.
I'd have to talk about data and exactly what you think data is.
Okay, now if we want to propose...
Can I just point out that you've gone from using the word fact to the word data, and the word fact and data aren't the same thing.
Okay.
Not all data would turn out to be facts.
Right.
For example, the number 1.
So if we want to propose that a moon we have yet to see has this shape on it, and we don't yet know that, is that a fact?
That would be a proposal about, it's a hypothesis about what we would find.
Can you say that it's a fact?
No.
Then we agree.
Good. So clarity is awesome. And there's nothing about theism that harms that in any way. In fact, the reason people originally believed that in the western parts of the world was because of theism.
I would argue otherwise, because it is dishonest to assert as fact that which is not evidently true, and you agreed with that a moment ago.
What you
Yet that's
just
what
said
all religions do.
Is it's dishonest to argue as fact,
assert as fact,
that which is not evidently true. What do you mean by evidently true?
You're going to say, it's okay to say that you believe X, but you can't state that X is true.
Do you have a mind?
Yes.
Good. Do scientists like Richard Dennett agree that you have a mind? Daniel Dennett, I'm sorry. No, they don't in fact agree on it. So it isn't self-evident that you have a mind. We're taking it as a working hypothesis. So lots of things we take as working hypotheses, maybe even the existence of God, aren't facts in the brute given of the chevron shape on a moon. Those are actually really simple things to deal with.
So when we have a handful...
Complex phenomena like minds are harder to deal with because there could be many ways of explaining them.
Okay. So when a handful of theists arguing with each other, giving specific details about God, and all of them contradict each other, they all being honest? Because they're all asserting absolute truth.
It could be that all of them are wrong, that some of them are wrong, or that one of them is right. All of those are logically possible. We'd have to listen to them.
If any of them said that there was a chevron on a moon that we haven't seen yet, and it hasn't been seen, so how would we know? Is that person being honest?
I wouldn't say they were being dishonest as much as being foolish.
Okay, well, I think we can compromise on that. Because you have a handful of people all asserting as fact conflicting
We're doing
beliefs.
fun, weird Socratic dialogue that has a kind of outcome. I teach Socratic dialogue. You want to be careful about using Socratic dialogue when you have the end in mind, because it's ersatz Socratic dialogue. Okay, go ahead then.
I was trying to illustrate something.
Go ahead.
Okay. The effect of it's whether you call it dishonest. I would say it's dishonest to say that you know something that you don't know.
Well, let's call it dishonest.
Okay, because I mean you're saying you know something you don't know.
I don't think there's moral intent, and I think dishonesty. See, this is again, we're back to terms. You shift from one term to the other. I think dishonesty requires moral intent. I think a lot of times people say dumb things that they shouldn't say, but they have no intent to deceive.
Okay, and my definition of a lie does include that they must have the intent to deceive.
Good. Then they're not lying.
Intellectually, the term intellectually dishonest still applies here.
No, you could only be intellectually dishonest. So, for example, my grandmother, who was taught in school, in her public school, that breast milk was bad for babies and that you should use government-certified milk, and went around telling people that even after she should have known better, but she only went through 8th grade, so she didn't. She wasn't being intellectually dishonest. She was just wrong. But she was saying that in good faith.
So it's not dishonest to pretend to know things you don't know.
It would be dishonest to pretend to know things you don't know, but not to be mistaken that you know things that you don't know. For example, in my opinion, you are wrong that God doesn't exist. And your logic is flawed on things like the ontological argument. But I would never say that you are intellectually dishonest, because I assume in intellectual good faith you've just come to a different conclusion than I have. Being wrong isn't a moral sin, even from an atheist point of view. Right?
So, Seitan Bruggencate somehow meets Sir Isaac Newton. Both make the same argument at each other, and I've seen this. Sir Isaac Newton wrote that he was chosen by God to have a higher understanding of the Scripture than any other man. And being the most brilliant man possibly in history, that's a fair thing for him to say. He probably has a better understanding of those things than any other man.
Well, except here's the problem. If I keep picking on what you're saying, it just sounds like I'm delaying you. But that's crazy, right? It's really silly to think that because someone has a high IQ, they're more likely to hear from God than someone with a low IQ.
Agreed. I'm not making that point.
So Newton, in fact, it isn't sensible. What you said was, well, if anybody had a right to say that, it would be, no. Lots of people have the right to say that. You don't have to have a high IQ to hear me. Right?
Given the context of the rest of the sentence, it would have made sense.
Okay.
Because his opponent is Seitan Bruggencate, a man who isn't trained in anything, who also makes the same claim. And both claim that they have this direct revelation from God, which is not God talking to them, but rather God talking to them through the Scriptures. So they're both reading the Scriptures, and basically what they're both doing is they're both interpreting the Scriptures, what they think it means, and then both claiming that God is telling them it is through the Scriptures, and that they both have a higher understanding of the Scriptures than any other man. Now, if both of these men agreed, I wouldn't have much that I could say about that, except that they disagree on a key point. And so I get Seitan Bruggencate with this. Sir Isaac Newton says that Jesus was not a divine being, that he was not the product of God. You say he is. You both are inspired by God, told by God, the absolute truth. You can't know anything unless you know everything. The only way you can know anything is if you know someone who knows everything. But since you don't know everything, you don't know if you know somebody who knows everything.
Okay, none of that is true. So you've just
Which
gone
one is
through a
being
long
dishonest, or
no,
either
no,
zero?
you've just gone through a long rant, none of which I concede. So now you've set up
now
a
I've
false
gotten to the
dilemma.
question. I didn't. I asked you, is either of them being dishonest?
I can't know the answer to that without using a science called hermeneutics, which I use as a secularly trained philosopher to understand something like Plato. The fact that we all read the text of Plato and are sometimes unsure of what Plato means doesn't mean Plato didn't exist, or that Plato didn't write a book, or that Plato isn't talking to us. It just means we need to have long philosophic dialogue using the science called hermeneutics, which I went through way too many grad seminars trying to decide what was right. So either both of them are wrong, one of them is right, or both of them are right because there's some meta theory that makes what they've said not contradict but cohere. I probably don't think the third one is true. And so I would want to look at the first two possibilities and have a long discussion. Why cut off
So
discussion?
is either one, because you said that Sir Isaac Newton, even compared to Seitan-Bruggencake, Sir Isaac Newton was still not justified in making that statement.
I didn't say he wasn't justified. I said his IQ had nothing to do with the justification.
It's the only thing he's got going on. It
No,
would
that's
given him
not
any
true.
more credence
He
than
could
it
be
is.
particularly pious. He could particularly good reader of text. Forget God and the Bible for me, making it so really complicated. If we're both reading Plato's Republic, and you say Cephalus, whose name means big head, leaves so the discussion can continue. And I say, no, I don't think that's quite right. I think he leaves because he represents religious piety, and religion has to leave for the discussion to continue. We both can't be right, and so we have a long discussion looking at the text, examining the manuscript, and we finally come to the conclusion that you're right and I'm wrong, or we just agree to disagree. We're not sure, because textual interpretation is not an exact science.
So what I'm getting is that you should not state as fact what is not evidently true. Like my wife was raised in a family divided between Catholics and Protestants, both telling her that the other parent is going to hell because they're in the wrong religion. So both factions of that
What do you
family.
mean by evidently true? You've never defined it. Certainly true?
Evidently was the way I defined
Yeah,
it for you.
I would never, ever, even as a philosopher in Plato studies, say it's a fact that my interpretation of the text is true. It would simply be true that my interpretation of the text is true. That's not a fact
As
type
you
thing.
correctly observed, I primarily deal with fundamentalists because my argument primarily is against creationism, and more specifically.
I'm a younger creationist, so I'm okay to talk to you about that. But I'm not a fundamentalist either. So I think I'm a little different than what you usually deal with. But that's okay. You can pretend I am. What I'm saying is your whole dilemma fails for this reason. I don't have to pick between the two of them. Nor do I have to doubt that the Bible's the Word of God. Nor do I have to do anything else. I just suspend judgment. Now the fact,
which is what I was arguing for.
Here's good news. They don't have to suspend judgment because the way research works is I read a book, I work really hard on it, I think I know what it says, I write a learned paper about it, and I assert this is what Plato means.
Okay.
And then someone contradicts me, and we don't kill each other. We have a giant seminar where we talk about our two views, and we may persist in disagreeing. But I'm not being a liar to leave the seminar and say, I think Plato says this.
I'm not just saying that lies are the only form of dishonesty. That you can be dishonest with yourself and not realize that you're lying.
Sure. But neither people in your case need to be doing that. They might be. I'd have to look at it.
Okay, you also said I didn't define evidence, but I did. I said that evidence is a body of objectively verifiable facts which are positively indicative of or exclusively.
Yes, I know you have that memorized, but we already moved through the fact that objective facts don't exist.
I did define it.
Yes,
And
your
so when
definition is
so
no
when
good.
I say now that something that we shouldn't assert as fact, that which is not evidently true, then I'm obviously talking about things that we can't show the facts to indicate that.
Yeah, lots of things are true for which there are no facts. 2 + 2 is 4 is
Which-
known to be true
which is demonstrable.
without any facts as you've defined.
I'm sorry, you said it wasn't even empirical, which it is.
2 + 2 = 4 is an empirical truth.
It also works with logic.
No, I'm sorry. You need to go get a book on philosophy of mathematics.
I just got a dictionary. It said it.
No. Mathematics, the number 1 does not exist in the physical world. So any truth of mathematics cannot be a truth of the empirical world by definition.
But you cannot demonstrate.
No, that math happens to work more or less is an amazing thing, and philosophers still wrestle with why that's true. Theists have a reason for it. Everyone else takes it as a brute given. But it's not an empirically known thing. You couldn't possibly know that math was going to work through empiricism. No, it just works.
Which means it's repeated. It's demonstrably repeatable.
You seem to think that something has to be repeatable to be true.
Not necessarily.
Right. So good. Let's eliminate that. And facts.
We agreed that the chevron.
Not everything. Right. That's right, and that does fit your definition of fact. But not everything does.
Okay, so clearly,
and facts are not objective.
So clearly, when I say that people should not assert as fact what is not evidently true, what I am saying is that people shouldn't make a statement that they know something that they can't give any indication that that is even true.
This is wrong.
In other words, we can't distinguish this from the illusions of delusion.
No, scholarship would be impossible if that were true. In scholarship all the time, I do the best I can. I look at the world, I look at the text, I look at my experience, I make the best judgment I can. I assert that as far as I can tell, something is true. It turns out not to be true. I'm not being a liar. I'm advancing the cause of scholarship. Being wrong is okay. Hooray for being wrong.
If you say that you know things you don't know, I would still call that dishonest.
Only if you should know better. In other words, if I'm working...
Shouldn't you know better than to know things you don't, than to say you know things you don't know?
That has nothing to do with what I just said, but it's kind of clever. It would make a good Twitter handle. I may steal it from you. Here's what I'm saying. If I study a manuscript or I study the natural world and I make an extrapolation from the manuscript or an extrapolation from the natural world, I might be wrong. I might even be seriously wrong. But if I present my views, I have to say something like this. This is what I think is true. I may even say, I know it's true. I've thought about it a long time. No in the loose sense, not that I'm certain, but this is the best I can do. You disagree with me, we have an argument. I haven't been naughty or intellectually disingenuous. I haven't broken the laws of reason. In fact, that's how reason moves forward. Throwing out an idea that you've investigated the best you can and discovering you're wrong. Let me give you an example. Aristotle talks about the nature of substance in Metaphysics, Book Zeta. I spent 14 weeks trying to understand what Aristotle meant by ousia in Metaphysics, Book Zeta. I decided it meant stuff, matter, crude matter. I presented that in a paper in a grad program, doing the best I can. Man, it turned out that I became persuaded by someone else in my grad program that that was entirely wrong. They didn't say, wow, Reynolds, you should have known better than that. You're being a liar. You're being disingenuous. That's the way scholarship works. In another case, I had a view about how Plato worked. My good friend Hud had a different view about Plato works. Hud's now teaching philosophy, I think, at Washington, and I'm, starting a new school. We still disagree, but I don't think Hud's a liar. I just think we
agree, and I'm not in the position you're trying to box me into. I mean, myself, I come to the passage of the Bible that you'll probably be able to tell me where it is better than I can. The bit about the four-legged locusts that have legs above their feet, right? I interpret that as, since we know that grasshoppers, typically called locusts, don't have four legs, that maybe they're talking about bats, because the Bible tends to classify things by what they do rather than what they are, which is why whales are fish and bats are birds. Bats could also be locusts because they go about on all fours as described, and they also swarm. So this is an interpretation that could be supported by what I'm saying.
Sure.
I'm not saying that I know that.
Sure.
I'm suggesting that this might be.
Well, if I know, you mean you're certain. you could study it long enough and look at all the arguments where I think it's a useful sense of the word no to say, yeah, I think this is right. And I'm going to base my book on it. I'm going to write this. And I'm going to say you should believe it. Because I think it's true.
I would still put that as an hypothesis if I can't verify
Great.
that is.
Good. We'll use that term then, hypothesis. And so imagine that's what Sir Isaac Newton and his friend were doing. They were both strongly advancing hypotheses about what the text said. Which one was right? I don't know. I'd have to look at both interpretations.
Sir Isaac Newton and his friend. You don't know who St. August is?
No, I don't know that background
now
story.
I can truly tell you that you are blessed.
Good. So here's the point. There's no dilemma there. In other words, it's just normal scholarship. We'd sit down and look at their interpretation of text.
Right.
And they both could be wrong.
Right.
Or one of them could be right. So
I have the feeling that since we began talking, you've been arguing against something I wasn't saying.
Well, what are you saying?
I don't even remember. It's been so long.
So far, I think what you've said is
but I've been
that
trying to find where what you're saying is relevant to where I was going. And although I lost where I was going, I never found where it was relevant.
Well, you started by saying that theists are not good because theists, and you've got
That
a little...
is actually not remotely what I said. I said there are rules that apply to me that don't apply to, and we could just call them believers. The rules apply to me that don't apply to believers.
As far as I can tell, that's not true.
Okay, I have to, you said reserve judgment when you can't be sure.
Right.
That's the rule that applies to me. But you can't be sure there's a God, but you're still going to say that there is. So you're going to maintain a belief, even though you can't be sure. You said last night that we can never know whether there's a God. But there's people all over the place who say that they know that there's a God, that they talk to it, that they have a personal relationship.
Yeah, you're simply equivocating about the word no. I think I know that
I don't
you
think
have...
I'm equivocating.
No,
I think I'm
hang
stating
on.
a fact.
Hang on. I think there are two useful senses of the word no. There's knowing something with what philosophers call Cartesian certainty. I know that 2 + 2 = 4. Once I understand that concept, I at least, and most people, find it impossible to doubt. It's indubitable. Most truths turn out not to be like that at all, especially interesting ones. I say I know my wife Hope loves me, but I know plenty of people who have turned out to be deceived, even though they had very little data. Like, it was reasonable for them to believe their spouse loved them. They acted on it, they built their whole lives on it, and it turned out they were just wrong. But we didn't run over them to say, wow, you're intellectually dishonest, you should have had a better epistemology. No, let me finish. When I say I know there's a God, I'm saying that's the best hypothesis I have. I think there's good reason to believe it. I think there's good philosophic reason. I think I have good experiential reason. And I think I have good communitarian and cultural reasons to believe it. Could I be wrong? First, I could be wrong to be a Christian. Someone else could be right in their interpretation of the divine. Sure, absolutely. Have those discussions all the time. Could I be wrong that God exists? Absolutely. So I don't have, and as far as I know, no Christian believes Cartesian certainty that God exists, unless, and one caveat, the ontological argument works. If the ontological argument works, then I can say that I'm certain there is a greatest possible being. We'll call him God. But that doesn't get me to the God of the Bible anyway. There'd be a big logical gap. So since I think the ontological argument probably works, that it's valid in its current form, and it persuades me, I can say I'm certain that the greatest possible being exists. We'll call it God. But that doesn't give me certainty about Christianity. I'm not at all certain that Christianity is true.
I think what I said that you objected to, and I can't, like I said, I can't remember because it was so long ago. And I remember one of the things that I said that you contested was that the purpose of religion was to make people believe, and you said that wasn't true. I can't think of a religion that doesn't require that, and that's why they're called belief systems. They have required beliefs, and they have prohibited beliefs, which by contrast is why free thinkers don't have required beliefs or prohibited beliefs.
Either I agree with you because I think every single human being has a belief system, whether they're materialists, naturalists, atheists, or theists.
I would say no, because I don't have required beliefs and I don't have prohibited beliefs. I'm free to believe whatever I
Are you
want.
required to do science to believe that the universe is real?
No, I don't have required beliefs. I don't have to believe anything.
Are you required to believe math works?
I'm inclined to hold only to what is
As
true.
far as that goes, then that's what I believe as a theist. I agree with you. If that's how you want to define knowing and believing, nothing you said is incompatible with Christianity.
So the prize in Christianity is not to believe. You don't get forgiveness if you but believe.
Wait, I thought we had now defined belief in a broader way.
No, I think you and I use a different definition for belief.
Okay, here's
when I say I believe something, it means that I suspect that this is true, or partial, or at least probably true, or at least closer to the truth.
Great, that's what
but
I mean.
I don't know.
That's what I mean by
believers seem to express that as a verb, as an act of will,
they
mind
should.
over matter.
If they do, they should.
I hear all the time that if they could only believe part of that.
Okay,
which
but
to
notice
me,
we're
when you say the sentence, if I could only believe part of that, that sounds like a pretend.
Yeah, okay. That person shouldn't say that. So when you meet them, they won't care what I say, but they shouldn't say that. That's sub-Christian. What you just said is what I believe about Christianity, which I believe is an explanation. It's the best explanation given best reason and best experience.
Okay,
Am I sure it's true in a Cartesian sense?
So believing that Jesus is your Savior is not the means of salvation?
My belief that Jesus is the Son of God and He is my Savior is my best explanation.
Your salvation is not tied to that.
Well, if I'm right, then it is, but I could be wrong.
So if you're right, then it is tied to that.
No, if I'm right, yes, it is tied to it. But notice, I don't have to have certainty about my belief to hold it, because we've already we've all agreed on that.
Right.
So in that sense, religious belief, in that sense, is no different than any other kind of philosophical belief.
Regardless whether we talk about Christianity or whether we talk about Islam, because the Quran says the same thing. No, the atheism is different.
No.
Yes, I haven't gotten to finish the point yet. Regardless whether we're talking about the Bible or whether we're talking about the Quran or we're talking about the Bhagavad Gita, they all praise religious faith and they praise belief, if you but believe. But all these rewards will come if you believe. Atheism, as an exception, does not offer anything if you believe. You don't have to believe.
No.
There's not a belief system. There's no faith required. It is very often, but not always, it is very often the rejection.
Do you act on beliefs?
Yes.
Do you get rewards by acting on beliefs?
Only when I'm correct.
Right.
Because I say that only
what I
accurate
would say
information
to
has
you,
practical
the
application.
religion that I believe in, let's forget about everybody else's religion, gives me rewards if I act on it, if I'm correct. So we're just the same.
I don't think so, but I think you're going to be arguing circles in
No, that's not. No, we're not arguing in circles at all. I'm accepting totally your definition. I'm agreeing with that we should all live like you say atheists believe that we should live, and that we should act based on best reason and best experience, and that's what I'm calling belief. And if I'm right about Christianity, then I'll get treats. Just like if you're right that there's steak over there in the corner and you act on it, you'll get the treat of the steak. So there's nothing weird about this, telling someone, hey, you should believe this because you'll get something good out of it. Could be true if I were an atheist. It could be true if I'm a theist. Now, that doesn't prove theism is true, but it does prove I'm not thinking differently than you are or in some kind of weird religious way. We're not arguing in circles at all. Win. Let me agree with you. I agree with you.
Okay,
hooray.
We'll just let that be.
But wait, how are we disagreeing?
Because every time I try to start making a statement, you choose to be part of that statement. I eventually forget what the statement was.
Okay. We're not doing that anymore, notice. You have said we should believe things, good atheism. We don't get rewards just for believing them. We get rewards for believing things or not believing them by following the truth. The best
By
evidence
following
and
the truth,
experience.
which means we withhold our. A belief is a conviction. So a lack of belief is a lack of conviction, right? So atheism is simply being unconvinced that a magical anthropomorphic immortal really exists.
Okay, so we got a weird description of God, which seems to have come off the Twitter feed. But leaving the insult and the
It's
bad
not an
language
insult.
aside, no, it's just false. I don't believe in that God. I don't believe in any magical being.
So, really?
No.
You realize that miracle and magic have the same definition?
No, they don't.
They're both the evocation of
Okay,
supernatural forces.
go read Richard Swinburne's book on miracles. He defines miracles. He doesn't define it as magic.
Very few
I know.
people realize that, yeah, the miracle and magic have the same definition.
Well, very
the
few,
evocation
very,
of supernatural forces.
very few people realize it because, as Christians understand it, that's not true.
I know that Christians don't realize it. Yeah, I get that. But that they are the same. They are effectively
Okay,
the same.
so here's good news. However I may have been confusing or naughty or done the wrong thing, we're both agreeing on exactly this. You don't have to be certain to act on a belief. You just have to follow best reason and best experience, do the best you can, and modify your beliefs based on the evidence and based on your experience as you go. And what I'm telling you is, that's what Christians believe you should do, and I think that's what you just said you believe you should do.
I want to make a clarification because I'm an epistemist. Is how I identify. What? Epistemist. Which means that I hold faith as being the most dishonest position it is possible to have. That it is not possible to have a less honest position than faith, because you're asserting as fact things which are not evidently true, and very often refusing to change your mind.
Your name is Aaron.
Aaron.
Aaron. Can I point out that you're merely repeating exactly the same phraseology, which we showed earlier is inadequate to modern philosophical understanding of data and fact. And you really need to let go of false beliefs you have when they no longer are adequate to explain philosophy.
I'm wholly down with getting rid of any false beliefs.
Right.
However, since I do deal with many young earth creationists who contradict you on a daily basis, they're all describing faith as belief as an act of will, where you will believe, you will eat the word, as one person described it. You read the most ridiculous thing out of the Bible and embrace each other and say, isn't it wonderful that this thing is true? Making themselves believe, right? Make believe. It's pretending. It's forcing a conviction.
I met an atheist once that couldn't be a Christian because they believed that when Jesus said he was the door, he was made out of wood. But we don't want to win an argument with the stupidest person we can find. We want to win an argument with the person we're actually talking with.
Right. So
and try to see the truth. And here's what I'm saying.
So what
Let
I'm
me
saying
agree
is,
with you.
Okay. Let me finish the point so you can understand what you're going to agree with.
All right.
Okay, so in my perspective, we base our beliefs on evident probabilities, past experience, and so forth.
Great.
And we can be uncertain about those things.
Great.
But that does not qualify as faith.
Great.
Okay, or we can base our beliefs on faith, which means we're going to believe this anyway. We've already decided we're going to believe
No, I
this.
don't agree that's what faith means.
We didn't have to have evidence to convince us.
No, I don't believe in that kind of faith. Great. So faith.
So what
if
was
we're going
the
to use
evidence
faith
that
that way,
convinced-
if we're going to use faith that way, I don't believe in it. So
Okay.
this thing over
This
here.
is my problem is with the theists I deal with. They make this definition.
Great.
And very
They're
often
wrong.
Okay.
So now let's deal with serious theism of the sort that's been around since Justin Martyr, who's 2nd century apologist,
And
all the
he's
way
guilty of
through.
the same thing.
No. This is what I do for a living. So let me tell you, here's faith.
Wasn't he the one?
You work from best reason to best experience. You commit yourself, the Napoleonic phrase, and then you see. And if it doesn't work, you start contradicting data, or it doesn't cohere, or you start saying illogical things, you change your mind. That's what you should do. That's living by faith. Why is it living by faith? because it's not certain.
So
In
Ken
other
Ham-
words, it's not
Ken
seen
Ham
clearly.
saying-
Ken Ham's no fan of mine. Google me under the.
But you understand he's using the definition I give, right? 'Cause
Well,
he says no evidence ever, and his website says, and every creationist website that I'm aware of posts a statement of faith wherein they word it differently in different places, but they all admit that they will never consider any evidence that they're
Here's good news for you. Ken Ham does not consider me a Christian. So, you know, hooray. I actually consider Ken Ham a Christian because I agree with you on your definition of what I'm calling faith. So, to talk to me in good faith, don't stick me with Ken Ham's definition of what faith is, nor
so this
pretend.
is what I'm disagreeing with. That the Young Earth Creationist organizations, the leading ones like ICR and AIG, what they're posting in their statement of faith.
I'm not responsible for what they say. Neither is the Orthodox Church. Neither is the Roman Catholic Church. Neither is the
So
Southern
you
Baptist
understand
Convention.
what I am
Neither
objecting
is...
to. I'm objecting
Sure.
to the definition of faith that you find in all the dictionaries, that you find in Martin Luther's
So
citations.
you agree that theism can be reasonable?
No.
Because we can... But we're following the same rules of reason that you're following. You just disagree with us about the conclusion.
You've asserted a conviction, okay? You're convinced of something for which there was no evidence to indicate that.
In your opinion, and in my opinion, there was evidence to choose that. Look, I was in grad school, I tutored under atheists, I listened to atheism, thought about atheism really hard, had theistic professors, atheistic professors, tested my beliefs, got to one point in my life where I didn't even want to be a Christian. I thought about not being a Christian, examined it, tried to put the world together, tried to follow the rules that I'm accepting that you described as a reasonable life, and I came to a different conclusion than you. So as Professor Shermer said to me last night, we need to lose this adversarial language where all theists are irrationalists, believing in magic.
I'm all about building the bridges. Okay? But you got to remember where I'm coming from, right? This is the chairman of the Board of Education in this state who says is a dentist with no scientific degrees at all, who says someone has to stand up to experts. Would you say that that's irrational?
Here's really good news for you, which I keep saying to my atheist friends. If you want me to come and testify in front of the Board of Education and argue exactly what I argued to you, which is we should follow best reason and best evidence, and we should make conclusions as we come up with them, and that's the way we should do a reasonable life, I'm happy to do that. And in fact, in some
Why would... No, how is it going to be broken?
Alright, 3232, go to 34 seat, 49-year-old female, snapped to the back. No further info.
Oh, bueno. It just got real serious real quick.
Yes, so she can be all but yeah.
Weirdo.
32 in there looking.
We pull up to the scene and we kind of just call out, hey, do we have a patient? And we see this big, tall guy stand up and say, yeah, I'm your patient. Can you come right down here, baby? We can get you on a stretcher? Not exactly what I was expecting, but, you know, hello, regardless.
You saw the knife?
Yeah, I tried to see it when he had pulled it out. When he started fighting,
Yeah.
I got the best of him.
What kind of knife was it, baby? Was it a kitchen knife, a steak knife?
Steak, looked like a steak.
You gonna meet him up there? You can't ride with him, baby. No, baby, nobody can ride. You can meet him up there, though. This guy wants his significant other to ride. In these situations, we do not do that because everything seems cool now. I don't know what happened. So, nobody rides.
You don't look like a female to me. See, I don't look like a female.
No, he said you don't. Our dispatchers told us it was a female.
Yeah, I am a female. I'm just homosexual.
Okay, no, but baby, technically, for medical purposes. What's your name, Patrick, you said?
Yeah, they call me Diva.
They call you Diva?
Yes.
All right, Diva.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, one over here, too. Okay, one. That's it. You gotta relax your arm.
Get some vitals real quick, and then we ready to roll.
The only injury that I can find is just a single stab wound, the upper back. He's not bleeding. He doesn't appear to be in any obvious respiratory distress. We want to transport him to the trauma center.
How long ago did this happen? Just now?
About 5 or 10 minutes ago.
What y'all beefing over?
Because I'm a homosexual. He got this punk ass gonna pull out a knife on me because I got the best of y'all.
Well, I hope you got him good at least. But you know who it was, so please gonna
Yes,
go
I
get him
do.
then, right?
Don't play with me, baby.
That's
I
my
am a
bad.
female, but I have the male instincts too.
Great.
It's a city that a lot of people come to because a lot of things are accepted.
Well, hey, Diva.
Hey, hey, hey.
How you doing?
Doing good.
If you have a homophobic tendency or you're racially prejudiced, you're gonna have a hard time here because people come here to celebrate whatever the hell they want to be, and we accept that here. And if you can't accept that, then you need to get the hell out of here because there's no place for you.
Got a little reminder not to turn your back on somebody you just beat the hell out of, I guess.
Right.
But Diva gonna live to keep on, Diva.
Right.
To 32, 47-year-old male, stabbed twice to the back.
And for a male, stabbed twice to the back.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm tossing your liver around.
It's all right. It's all right. My liver's pretty healthy. I haven't drank much lately. It's repairing itself, preparing for justice.
Right.
Friday, you go down this road, I'll be, ooh.
Is that what it is? Oh, the pain. Oh, no. Oh, no.
All right, 32 on scene with PD.
What's up? What up, Mama? We pull up to the scene, and we kind of have to search around a little bit to actually find the patient.
So you able to walk?
I'm down the stairs right now.
All right.
Watch your stuff is bloody.
The first thing I noticed is just a trail of blood, you know, in the grass, on the concrete, on the steps, and then inside of the home. Nick, I'll be in the back of the truck.
All right. As we walk in, we see the patient walking down the stairs, which is obviously a good sign.
So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Too many to count.
He's got about 13 to the back and a good 4 or 5, 6 on the side. So that's 20 stab wounds?
Yep. Any kind of upper torso area, when you have wounds, you want to make sure it didn't puncture the lung. You want to make sure that it didn't puncture an artery so they'll bleed out. You want to make sure that those things are taken care of first.
Drop them in when we get in there. We got a lot of bandaging to do.
He's got about 13 to the back.
12 to the side.
And a good
left side.
4 or 5, 6 on the side. So that's 20 stab wounds?
Yep.
You got a whole bunch, baby.
I particularly don't know how well I would be walking around and talking with 20-some-odd stab wounds. This guy's doing a great job at, you know, staying alive. All right, baby, we're gonna take care of you, okay? All right, somebody hand me a tourniquet over here. He's complaining of stomach pain, so he could be bleeding internally.
No, I know. Ow.
Take a deep breath for me, right?
He lives in the
Hold on, take some deep
Don't
breaths
talk,
real
take a
quick.
deep breath.
Take some deep breaths. One of the things we do before we're covering these wounds is checking to see if we can see any air coming out, because that would kind of clue us into the fact that these may have penetrated the chest cavity far enough to collapse the lung, because that could be fatal to him. Hold on, let me have this arm.
I don't know. He's on. Yeah, kind of something that's gonna make us know it's him.
Y'all got a line over there yet or what?
The guy
just got out of jail. Only been out of jail 3 weeks.
He said some dude that just got out of jail came over. Apparently he got to a scuffle with a guy. Ended up, the guy had a knife and the guy was on the bottom just stabbing him on the right side and in the back.
You ready, baby? Yep.
Let's go.
I'll give it to you in a second. This hurt? All right, one of y'all are gonna have to hold pressure on that so he doesn't eviscerate. Keep your hand on it. Allergic to anything? Anything else? Any medicine?
I didn't even know I got stabbed. What a douchebag.
I agree with you. That was a very douchey move.
32 at the hospital.
Cell phone slice.
What was the final count?
23 hole stab wounds. So the dude said he couldn't see the knife because he was fighting with him the whole time. I
Right.
was like, bruh, you're gonna have to learn how to fight or run better because 23 times?
Woo. We were on scene for 5 minutes and 14 seconds. But you know what? That's repetition. There's so much trauma in this city that we have to be thebomb.com.
Yep. As usual. Rocked it out.
3220, code 3 for 34C in the third.
Somebody stabbed. They're out. Got to go.
It's channel 3. The person that did it is no longer at the location.
We waiting on code 4? That's the hood, though. Hey, you want to make the play? You want to go in?
The call we get is at a local dagger shop. Very familiar with this dagger shop. It's pretty much in the hood. The scene might not be safe. I'm going in, man.
Think I have, yeah.
Is the female over here?
All right, then.
What's going on? Ooh, yeah, you're gonna need some stitches, Mom. You know, 2 females got in a verbal argument and one pulled out some type of blade and stabbed another person.
What you gonna have, baby? Look at your arm.
Her arm was slit open. You can see the fatty tissue coming out.
Have a seat over here, sweetheart. Sit down.
17 years.
Oh, my Lord. This is one of her friends that did this, so that adds a whole nother level of emotion. It's okay.
I know, baby. It's all right.
Hold deep breaths, okay? You're gonna be fine. If I didn't believe that, I would not tell you that. You know, you want to calm her and get her heart rate down and get all those things that could potentially exacerbate bleeding, and calming is sort of an important part of the job.
This don't hurt my nose.
It's not, no, it's not. That's what I want you to listen to me about. I'm a nurse. I work in the hospital, too. We numb stuff like that. You will not feel that, okay? I promise. I would not lie to you, okay? You'll be in and out real quick.
And just as when we finally getting her calmed down,
You ain't gonna feel that.
this cat just jumps in the ambulance and starts yelling at her, making the situation much worse.
You gotta get it. You ain't gonna feel that.
Hold on.
They gonna hit me with that bitch too.
We're gonna take her. We're gonna take her to university. We need you to calm. Calm now.
I want you to listen to me, sweetheart. I don't want your nerves to get bad. Turns out this guy is her friend, and he means well. He's just trying to talk her into going to the hospital, but he's so excited that really all he's doing is getting her more riled up when really what she needs to do is calm down.
Let's take care of you. If he wasn't gonna get away from us, we need to get away from him.
You're not gonna feel the whole thing. You'll be in and out real quick, okay? She's got a little puncture, dude.
Yeah, you got a little puncture hole.
Is that the only one?
I don't know.
She did have a poke to the chest. When they have something in her chest like that, doctors want to see that immediately.
Let's go.
Come on, let's go.
Get y'all's asses in. We'll numb it before they stitch it, I promise. No, that's not how we fix things, baby. I don't want to hear that noise about how you're gonna cause more problems, okay? You let the police handle that. How many times you see all this stuff in the news about people getting involved with this stuff and it don't end right? I don't want to hear that noise.
Couldn't kill me.
Well, you know what? She didn't, and I'm happy about it. As long as you promise me you're not gonna go down the same road with it. Baby, that's the stuff we gotta change here. And you know that.
Get back up 6249.
Like on the way to the hospital, she's like, I'm gonna get her. I got her.
Stop. It's gonna keep going in
So then she's gonna do something with her, and then one of her people is gonna do the same thing and be coming back for her. That's not what I want to hear. I want to hear that you're gonna let the police department do their thing. How would you feel if I stabbed you? Would we be able to overcome that?
I'll be good.
Yeah?
Your wife can be your widow, but...
Surgery 20, patient has collapsed, and advised that he's stabbed in the chest.
So apparently this guy is unresponsive and stabbed in the chest. 10-4, we're 1097 area.
Come on, Jay, wake up, bro.
Is he talking to you, Carl?
Hey, man, we're gonna sit you up, okay?
Sit up, sit up, sit up, sit up. There you go. We got you, man. Put your hands on your chest. Put your hands on your chest. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's go.
We got you, my man. We got you.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, I said. You got two punctures to the chest. But we get him loaded on the stretcher. I'm not even looking at this kid's face. You know, my thing is I'm looking at the holes he has in his chest that you stabbed twice. Blood is pouring everywhere. You know we have to go. We got you, dude. You're gonna be all right.
Yeah, we got you, man. We got you.
What's your name, my friend? I went to school with you. What's up, this Titus, man? I went to school with this guy. Immediately, this call goes from being professional to personal. What's up, baby? Look, I'm gonna hold you down. Yeah, it's me. Look, I'm not gonna let nothing happen to you. I need you to calm down. I got you, man. I promise you.
Titus, monitor.
I got you. Look, a lot of things gonna be happening, but I just need you to keep talking to me, all right, yo? You got the best on you, all right? I'm gonna cut your pants, all right, man? Yeah, you all right. You got kids, man. I already know that. We know each other too long for this, bro. I promise I won't let nothing happen. We're doing everything we got. You got the best.
Time to go. That's what scene time is. I mean, because we got a lot going on right there.
I know right now I have to be professional and do my job because that's what's gonna save my friend's life. 3220, we at the hospital.
Good. Titus is taking you out, okay?
Who's his last pressure?
140 over 9. Yeah, he's still doing good. This is where all the best doctors are. There's gonna be a lot of doctors asking you a bunch of questions all at the same time, okay? You gotta stay awake and answer them, all right?
Yo, man, that kid we just picked up, man. Been knowing him since back in the day, dude. Cut classes together back in the 9th grade. Really cool cat, you know?
When you recognize him?
Usually when I get up to a patient, I'm not seeing faces, I'm just seeing what I have to do, so I'm going through everything in my mind. So once we got him in the truck and I realized he was kind of stabilized, I wanted to get that blood pressure, that's when I actually looked down at his face. I know this kid. I guess New Orleans is so small in the job we do, you never know who you're running into. That's why, like, calls like that make this more than a job, you know what I mean? So you really
Yeah, you could tell it hit you at home a little bit with that one.
Dude, you know, I mean, I wasn't expecting to see it. Usually, you know, we prepare for a lot of stuff, but seeing somebody you know.
I think him knowing you was there, he asked a couple times on the way to the hospital if you were still in the truck.
All right. And everybody should know, man, you don't die in my truck, dude. You die on your own time, man, you know what I mean?
3232. Contact unknown age, male, or so 3 and 1/8 foot tire.
Get a call for a 34C, which is a stabbing victim near the casino.
This is where the drama's at,
Right.
which is what I'm down with.
Why are you always down for the drama?
I need a story. I feel like if I'm gonna get myself involved in a situation in which I need an ambulance at the end of the night,
Yeah, it better be drama.
there's gotta be a good story. I say, oh yeah, you know, I was visiting New Orleans and I just tripped on a crack in the sidewalk. It's like, oh, you wound up in a cast for that? You trip over air all the time? No. What happened to me was, NOPD starts chasing somebody, hops a fence, runs through the parking lot that I'm in, and then 3 chickens run by that's running from a Rottweiler that knocks me over and breaks my leg.
That is quite the story.
You know what I'm saying?
You know, I was sleeping right over there, sir. Thank you, sir.
We get there, he's awake talking, so that's a good sign.
All right, you want to cut this? Okay, then take it off.
I'll take it off.
He lifts his shirt and he's got several stab wounds to his torso and all.
That would hurt. Okay, your belly hurt at all? He's got 4.
Where's your ID at, man?
I got a food stamp card, that's all I got.
Oh.
All right, Barry, do me a favor, baby. Stop yelling. We in a box, okay? We can hear you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yo, Barry, you got any medical problems at all?
Yeah, I got stabbed.
Relax your arm.
Did you say exactly where it happened?
No, it
Right
sounds
there.
like it was over there.
Right over there.
I need you to relax your arm.
Right on that.
I need you to relax your arm.
We can see size of wounds. You can't really tell how deep they are. But without an x-ray or without proper medical care, basically get bad.
Me and my buddy Floyd, we was just sleeping, and all of a sudden this guy come up and tried to rob me. And we started stabbing him. Yeah, I started looking out his ass.
What did he stab you with?
I don't know what he stabbed me with.
So he's like doing this? He didn't get Floyd too, did he?
I hope not. I hope he didn't get Floyd.
Does this hurt?
Oh, yeah, real bad.
3232. Yes, ma'am.
All right, any alcohol, drugs tonight?
Yeah, I drank some alcohol.
It's all good. I ain't judging, just gotta ask, that's all. Your pressure's better than mine, man. Something's working for you.
3232 at the trauma center.
Your driver sucks.
Yeah, tell her that when do me a favor and you tell her that when she opens the door, right?
No, I don't think I'll do that.
I got you back, bro. I'm bigger than her.
Yeah.
Don't worry, she ain't got no knives. I pat her down before every shift.
Thank you.
You ain't getting stabbed again tonight. Holly can barely see over the steering wheel, which is why she hits the bump so hard. He want to tell you something.
You're a rough driver.
I already know about the bump. I didn't make the streets.
Yeah, but you make how fast you drive over the top of them things, though.
Turret rating will soon fall.
Safe, be strong. Let's do this.
Get that stretcher in here.
You're gonna bleed to death.
Grab the knob. Grab the knob.
No, they're not dead. I can work.
You know, I'm like the peanut butter and you the jelly. You know, you the Kool-Aid and I'm the sugar. I'm the sandwich and you the meat. We can just go together. That's why we such a good partnership.
We do all right.
3250, you're going out to a 57-year-old female face on fire while smoking using the oxygen tank.
Her face caught on fire smoking a cigarette on her. Sounds like a code 3 to me, bruh.
Sounds like a patient who got some burns to the face. So worried about their airway. Hopefully they didn't get any burns to the airway.
I'm gonna want to check for that soot in the airways, make sure they ain't got no like serious burns or nothing like that.
Right? Well, lucky for her, she got me and you coming.
Exactly.
All right, let's rock and
Get
roll.
it. Hey, I'm gonna grab my gloves out the back. What's going on?
She was on her
Yes.
oxygen machine, and she won't smoke a cigarette, and their brother started blowing in her face.
So was it like a complete flame that blowed in her face?
Yeah,
Or?
yeah, her face is burning.
Woo. Let's see what they need to hand with. 6249, I'm on scene.
You hurting anywhere, my love? Your face?
My face. My face gone. Help me, please.
We are, baby. We gonna get you in our little chair, get you down, and get you to university, okay? We're on scene for a female patient whose face on fire. Contact is gonna be a burn activation.
Relax your arm. Let me get your blood pressure real quick. I know, just let me see it.
To give us a stat chat removal delay as well.
Oh, I'm cold. Yeah, baby. It's because you have burnt yourself. How long ago did this happen?
Just now.
Why are you smoking a cigarette with your oxygen?
I was about to take it off. And,
well, look, it's going to be all right, all right?
It's gonna be all right. We're gonna take care of you, okay, baby? All right, you ready, baby? Get you to the hospital. Make sure those burns not down the airway.
oh, God. Oh, I'm in pain.
Stretcher right behind you, okay?
Okay.
I know, baby.
All right, let's
Let's
go
just get us
buckle down.
secured, yeah.